But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Oh, oh, she's running out again. She's running out. She runs, 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 runs. Welcome, everybody, to the House of Auger show. I'm your host, the man of the house, JT Auger, and with me tonight are my co-hosts, Sativa, Adam, McIntyre, Joel, and Nicole. Excuse me. Everybody say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, and quick disclaimers, this is not a family-friendly show. This isn't a kid-friendly show. This is, we're going to have a lot of jokes of an adult nature. We will be discussing subject material of an adult nature as well. So if you're underage or easily offended, you might want to leave now. Tonight, we have a very special guest, one of our very own, our newest admin from our group, and one of my newest favorite people, Metalface. Are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Hey! Now, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, your real name is Sativa. Are you okay with me using that tonight?
You know what? Either or, whatever works. In the general days of my life, it kind of depends on where I'm at, what people call me. At this point, my own husband does not use my legal name. I have been Face for so long that it is honestly less common for me to hear Sativa than it is Metalface or Metal or Face.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Very cool.
Either one works for me.
I dig your name just because it's so, I've never heard anybody with that name before. As much as I'm sure you've been getting shit for it your whole life, I still think it's a pretty name. So, and that's coming from a guy who doesn't even smoke weed. So, figure.
That's almost sweet.
Almost, but not quite.
Almost, not quite.
Normally we do a week in review. We didn't have plenty to talk about, and I think we will this week as well. But there is actually one topic I kind of wanted to go over. I don't know if anybody else has heard about this. I find it interesting. Here in my home.
And there went Auger.
Off to a great start.
Man, that was quick.
I'm not sure what's happening in his home state, except the straw thing. I don't really keep up on California at all.
Yeah. There's a lot of fires.
So, there we go. Fun facts, everybody. I'm from Wyoming, so I have no idea what goes on. Pretty much anywhere other than Wyoming or Colorado.
And we may have to mute ourselves because we've got our dogs barking outside, and I can kind of hear them.
I was curious whose dog that was.
Let me go. We're going to go ahead and mute ourselves. Let me go see if I can get them to shut up.
Okay.
Who, me?
Yeah.
No,
Yes, you.
I guess I must have been talking to myself for a while there because I stopped myself as I realized. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. And I said, is anybody there? And nobody was. So I'm not sure where I left off. I was going to talk about something that's happening here.
We got as far as home state.
Yeah. Here in my state of California, there's an issue going on. It has to do with this homeless guy. I guess a couple months back or so, there was a woman who ran out of gas, and some homeless guy happened to be there and heard that, or saw her situation or predicament. He had $20 on him, and he gave her the $20. She was so overwhelmed with gratitude that she and her live-in boyfriend decided to start a GoFundMe for this guy, and raised upwards of $400,000 from over 14,000 people in a real short time. Apparently, I guess this must have been a few months ago. Actually, quite a few months back. Anyway, there are pictures apparently of the couple. This all the money they raised was supposed to be for this guy. Now the homeless guy, he's got this addiction, problem and everything. But so they were like just giving him bits of his money, kind of like they were am I still there?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, I thought I got kicked again. I was like, whoa, it happened real fast. So apparently, they were treating it as though they were his gatekeepers or his parents or something. He even says like it was a joke at first, because they would dole out money. I guess from their perspective, they were doing this to help keep him from just spending the money willy-nilly and going on a drug-fueled rampage or whatever. I don't know. But it turns out that he asked for the remainder of it, and they were like, well, it's all gone. And he was like, wait, what? So now the courts are involved. He's suing them for the remainder of his money. They swear up and down there was like 200 left. Then in an interview they did, they said, yeah, there's 200 grand. And then it turned to 150, and now it's all gone. And the courts have brought in a forensic, what did they call it?
Accountant, a forensic accountant.
Yes. Which apparently, I didn't even know that was a thing till I heard about this story. And the guy, they did an interview with the homeless guy, and the homeless guy was saying, yeah, so the live-in boyfriend is apparently a raging fucking, has a raging gambling addiction. And my biggest laugh at this whole thing, like the whole thing's kind of like, what the fuck? But that part, can you imagine if somebody came to you and was like, yeah, man, I see you're in a predicament. I'll tell you what, let's start you a GoFundMe page. I'm going to take care of that. And I'm going to make sure that, we raise some money for you. But I got to tell you, man, I got this wicked fucking monkey on my back. And, man, sometimes I go on benders and just fucking raise hell, paint the town red, and fucking gamble all my money away. It's a real hard problem. But like, don't raise any. Can you just give me access to that money, please, Mr. Gambling Addiction? Holy fuck, that is like the worst guy to have as your fucking, the one holding your money. Yeah. So
yeah, it seems like such a bad plan.
Right. Have you guys heard about this? Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd seen a little bit. I didn't actually bother reading into it. Probably should have.
So
give me something to contribute here.
No. Well, it's not like I told anybody I was going to talk about it. I just thought it was amusing that apparently there are, since the forensic accountant has gotten involved, since the court has gotten involved, pictures have surfaced of them like going to Vegas, taking helicopter rides, all kinds of craziness. And they're both like, yeah, we don't know what happened to the money.
Yeah, I think they bought a brand new car too.
Yeah,
she makes. Are you serious? I didn't hear about that part. Yeah. She makes something like 43 grand annually, and he's a carpenter. So these expenditures are like way not in their fucking pay range. Like this is not what you would normally be doing given your annual income. So, gee, I wonder, where'd that come from? How'd you guys get the money to pay for all that? It's just stupid to me that they're fucking not fessing up. Like, really? You don't know where the money went? Really? Fucking really? I just think it's funny.
That's insanity. I'm a little surprised, given the nature of my usual timeline dribble, that hasn't popped up in droves for me yet.
Maybe it's just a local story. I don't know.
No, it's not just local. I mean, our local talk radio guys in Austin. They were talking about it just a couple days ago when all that broke as well. So yeah, it's national news, and I saw it on Fox and CNN. They all carried it.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's funny. Maybe I just live in a black hole of news. That's also possible. Jesus. Apparently, I'm the only one that didn't get the memo about about all this nonsense.
Now, for those curious, I think we've exhausted that particular story. So I'd like to get right into things with you, Sativa.
That was the shortest week in review we've ever had.
It is. Well, trust me, she's going to be far more interesting.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
For those who don't know, her nickname Metalface is for good reason. She has metal piercings all over her lips and nose and face, everywhere. Right? How many piercings do you have?
Grand total. I actually sat because I knew you were going to ask that. I sat down and counted today. Thank you, and I have 62.
Wait, can you say that again?
I have 62.
62 piercings.
Mm-hmm.
Holy fuck out of here.
Well, suffice it to say, you have earned your name.
Yes.
Where the fuck? Okay, so how many do you have in your face?
Oh God, now you're gonna make me pick. So out of 62, let's see. Hold on, give me just half a second here.
You can round about. You don't have
I'm gonna do the easy way, and we're gonna do some subtraction. Okay. So basically 62. So I'm gonna count my ears and face together. Let's see. From 62, we're going to go ahead and take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're gonna take a total of 8 away from 62. Bringing us to what, 54? 54 from the shoulders up.
You have 54 piercings above your shoulders?
Yes. And of course, a good portion of those, well, a good portion of them are in my ears, of course. How
many piercings do you have in each ear?
Oh, shoot, they're not even. I think I've got like 12 in one and maybe 8 in the other. So that accounts for 20 right there.
You can have 12 piercings in one ear?
Oh, God, I've got plenty of room in that ear yet.
Are you serious? Wait a minute. Does that fuck with your ears at all? Like, I've seen 2 or 3, but I've never seen...
I'm sorry, what was that?
Does that mess with your ears at all? It was a joke.
Auger, it was a joke.
Oh, God damn it. I missed the joke. I'm a little slow today.
That's okay. We still love you. No, actually, I hear just fine. And here's the thing. What people don't realize is here's the thing is that my lobes, you see a lot of people with their stretched earlobes. My first set of lobe piercings is actually stretched to 3/4 of an inch. The rest of them are actually pretty fine gauge. They're like 14, 16, things like that. Each different part of your ear actually serves a completely different purpose. So as long as they are fairly intact, you can pretty much do everything that you need to do. And you can still hear all of the things.
My question was less about hearing, which is probably why I missed the joke, because I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking more about the physical health of your ear. Does it cause any issues with your ear on a health basis?
So done properly, no. And of course, all body piercing carries some type of risk. The biggest thing that we see go wrong with ear piercings, which I've been fortunate enough to not have happen on a large scale, is you know how boxers get like cauliflower ear?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is actually caused by broken cartilage. Broken cartilage does not repair itself because cartilage itself actually has no blood flow. So it's all the tissue around it that carries the blood flow. So for as vascular as your ears actually are, the absolute bulk of it is just in the tissues, okay? Not the cartilage, the actual soft tissue like your flesh. So we will see where poorly placed piercings or piercings that were well placed and then treated poorly later on, aside from the obvious risk of infection from an open wound, you definitely have the option of breaking cartilage either during or after a piercing with inappropriate jewelry or inappropriate sleeping habits is one of the big ones we see. Breaking cartilage. You can do that sort of thing. You can cause a fair bit of trouble, but.
So here's something. We should probably, for the audience, let everyone know you have so many piercings because you happen to be in the piercing industry.
Yes, I am in fact a professional body piercer. I actually own my own shop. And so I'm not just like out of the blue yapping about ear anatomy and whatnot. It is my job to know these things. So, I guess that would be, here's the problem that I have, and you may have to stop me here and there and mention things like that because I have a really bad habit of assuming that everybody knows things about me. So when I start talking about it, I'm just like, yeah, I obviously have the credentials to speak on this. And everyone's like, who the fuck are you? So it's so bad. I do that all the time, even in person to random people. I do this and they're like, okay. I'm like, oh,
you
hi.
Just know me.
I'm like, oh, hi. You don't know who I am. How are you doing?
That's kind of my job as the host to make sure that I cover those bases. So how long have you been? How long have you been in the piercing game, as it were?
Oh, so this is a question this is kind of a double-edged sword, this question. I do not condone starting into this industry the way that I did. I don't recommend it.
This sounds interesting.
Yeah, so I have been licensed in the state of Wyoming, which is the only place I've ever lived or been licensed. I've been licensed here for just over 9 years now. But I actually, when I was younger, so here's the thing, where I live in Wyoming, for the longest time, it was standard practice for shops to tell people that it was illegal to pierce minors, which has just not been the truth for a very, very, very long time. It was damn near impossible to go anywhere in our home state to get piercings as a minor. Now, what the law actually dictates is that, of course, anywhere under the age of 18, we have to have a parent or legal guardian with appropriate identification come in with the minor with appropriate identification. Yes. But for the longest time, no shop here would do it. So all of us that wanted piercings were having to go to Colorado. Now, my mom was always super supportive of all the weird shit that I wanted to do because I was a straight A student. I got shit dealt with. Like, it didn't even matter because she's like, the important stuff is done. If the worst that my teenage daughter wants to do is put a hole in her face, so be it. So my mom was totally the cool mom who made me like research everything, and we went down to Colorado. Well, after that, I had a couple of friends who had wanted to get some piercings, and they decided, well, we're going to do them ourselves. Well, one of my girlfriends, I shit you not, you know those metal like spiral key rings that hold all your shit together?
Yeah.
She literally pried apart one of those with a pair of her father's pliers and shoved it through her lip. It was horrifying.
I don't imagine that's the appropriate nor proper way to do that kind of piercing.
No, it's not. So we got together and collectively decided, and the general consensus was, well, Sativa already has a piercing that she actually got done by a professional, so she knows how to do this. And I was kind of like, no, I don't think that's what that means at all. But I kind of rationalized, well, she's going to do this to her face anyway. So I probably can't fuck her up any worse with an actual piercing needle, which was readily available everywhere on the internet at the time. And then she did with a key ring. So we ordered the needle and everything, and we kind of really sort of wiggled our way through the whole situation. And I pierced her lip. Like, no big deal, dumb teenage girls doing dumb teenage girl shit without getting knocked up, though. So that was a bonus.
That's always a bonus.
Exactly. So really, and even looking back in the grand scheme of dumb teenage girl shit, like we could have been doing worse. We were just stabbing each other in the face. It's fine. And so
can't get pregnant from Metalfaces.
Exactly. So so I did that for her, and then before you know it, I had other kids coming up to me like, "Oh, hey, you're the one that pierced Aaron's lip. Like, you should pierce my eyebrow." And before you know it, it was time, and I wanted another piercing myself. I was, I think, 16 by this time. And I told my mom, hey, I'd like to get another piercing. And she goes, oh, okay, well, she's like, you know, a lot of your friends have been showing up and, you know, they've got nice piercings. Like, we shouldn't necessarily have to go to Colorado. Like, where are your friends getting theirs done? Cue, super awkward conversation with my mom. I was never particularly good at lying, especially to my mother.
Right.
And
so,
she was
I take
she
it you
was
didn't lie to her this
livid.
time.
No, I did not. She was pissed. But she
Well, yeah, I
took her
mean,
time.
it was kind of a lie. It was kind of a lie of omission, right? Like, it wasn't that you just didn't happen to mention it up until this point.
Exactly. So, you know, I had kind of lied to her by omission, but she had never outright asked me. Like, it still wasn't really okay. And I understand why she was pissed. I mean, there was a lot of risk involved with what I was doing. And of course, I know that now. And
Right.
so she sat me down and she made me order all of the stuff that I needed to do and made me start going to shops and all of these things. And the long and short of it is I just kind of went
Really?
on like that.
See, your mom
My
kind
mom
of
was
pushed
a
that on
badass. Yeah, my mom was a total badass about it. And, you know, she was like, well, here's what we're going to do. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. And she started making me, you know, do all the research and take all of these anatomy courses and really just gave me the appreciation for body piercing for what it is. And genuinely, without her doing that, I'm not sure what I would be doing, you know, for a living right now. So it was actually super cool that she did, but she was crazy supportive. And yeah, so I definitely, God, go get an apprenticeship. Do not trial and error that shit on your friends because you can fuck people up really badly. I'm super fortunate and I don't have any really monster horror stories from my own hand. And that is nothing
That's
shy
always
of
good.
miraculous. Nothing shy of miraculous, given that I was just kind of aimless, seriously fucked anybody up in a very major way because it's super possible. I mean, you look at the
How easy
capacity
is it
for oh god,
to really fuck someone up?
so
I mean,
easy.
in a really bad way. I mean, I get it that if you do a piercing bad, you know, okay, so it might it might leave a scar. But I mean, to really
Or
fuck someone up, how easy is that? And
you
what
can jam
does
through
that entail?
somebody's artery and cause very serious bleeding. You
Where are
can
you
cause
fucking getting piercings that you're close to an artery?
your lip, for one thing. You've got arteries that run all over your face. And people don't think of it because we always think of arteries as in the wrists, in the arms, and the thighs. But you actually
So
have
you're talking
tail ends.
capillaries.
No, I'm talking arteries, my friend. I actually not too long ago had a gal who my name had came up with because she had gone to another shop somewhere and had gotten a lip piercing and they ran that sucker right through an artery and she ended up having to have it removed and stitched up because they could not curb the bleeding. Um, so you have the very serious danger of, you know, things like that. You also have, like I said, and anytime that you're getting into like broken cartilage, things like that, even on the more moderate end of the spectrum where it's not as severe as full on cauliflower ear, that's not really fixable. They can't really repair that. Certain types of scarring can be actually permanent and quite disfiguring without surgical intervention. You can cause massive damage to somebody's teeth, their gums, their piercings. Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
across the board. Do you remember? You might actually be old enough, Auger. I use this analogy with my clients here and there, but most of them at this point are too young to get it. Do you remember a number of years back when that whole picture came out because Michael Jackson had like collapsed his nose?
yeah.
Do you remember that? That really gnarly
Yeah.
one? Well, think about how many people you see walking around with septum piercings.
Can that happen to
That's
you
that
from a
little.
septum piercing?
It can if it's done improperly. If you break that cartilage up there, that's very fragile cartilage. Okay, that can it can literally collapse down in on your face, either by way of broken cartilage or by way of infection. It can also do that. In fact,
Jesus.
to give you an idea as to how weak the cartilage that basically creates your nose actually is, when a person dies, when they put the sheet over them, they actually tent that sheet up over the nose because very shortly after we die, nothing is really in there supporting that cartilage anymore in terms of blood flow to healthy tissue, and it can and actually will collapse with just the weight of the sheet that they'll lay over your corpse.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Fun fact.
That must.
Also,
Go
here and
ahead.
there, you'll get piercings because some piercings swell more than others, and even across the world, different climates and different things can affect how piercings will heal. And so
I
you
didn't
can
think
get
about that.
jewelry. Yeah, you can get jewelry in a piercing that is too short or too small, and it can actually embed and have to be cut out. I mean, man, oh man, it's you can also you've got piercers out there still using just complete garbage jewelry that can cause serious allergic reactions in people.
Really?
And then of
Wait, what
course,
do you mean, like pop metal?
oh god, yeah, like base metals, cheap steel, composite stuff, things that are plated where you've literally got like paint chipping off into the piercing channel. Which you got to think about it, it's
Jeez.
inside your body. I mean, anything that hits that piercing channel is now inside your body, at least until it heals a full fistula. So, yeah, you can do a lot, and that's not even mentioning, disease transmission, things like that. It's horrific.
Disease transmission from using, um, like improperly cleaned gear, needles and stuff.
Yep, or reusing
Uh,
needles, not sterilizing your gear appropriately, not cleaning your area properly, not cleaning
so you have to
yourself
be
when you
very
don't apply it
medical
properly.
about things.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's it's and here's the thing. People are really I've noticed and I've talked to people elsewhere where they say that they've noticed this as well. And I always thought it was just kind of a Wyoming thing and I was wrong. When somebody goes in to get a tattoo, they're thinking about it and they're watching people open everything, making sure that everything's sterile, making sure everything's clean. With piercings, I found because my general procedure when I sit a client down, as I'm opening all of my tools and all of their jewelry and everything, I take a moment to, especially with my newer clients, I try to explain to them, like, hey, this is what this tool is, this is what it's used for. That way, it kind of calms their nerves a little bit because it's not just this scary tray full of shit that they've never seen before. It's okay, this is this thing's purpose.
Like a
And I
torture tray.
exactly, and that's honestly what it can look like to people, and I get it because I hate sitting down with another piercer to get anything done because I know what that shit's for, and it scares the crap out of me. But no, it does. It's everybody laughs, but it's the truth. But
Yeah,
no, and I've
really.
had people literally comment to me like, "Oh, that's really cool that you show us all that. I've never had a piercer do that." I'm like, "And you've still gotten pierced by them? Why?" And I make sure to show them at the end of my procedure. I make them watch me put their needle into the sharps container and I make them watch me put the tools where they go while they await processing. I make them watch me tear down and set up all of it, so
Is
that
that
they
not
know.
standard procedure?
I am beginning to wonder that as many clients as I've had comment on it, it blows my mind. And in all fairness, being in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I'm in the capital city here, and we're not a big
Mhm.
place, but you got to understand we have people coming to Cheyenne from a fairly good radius around because we're closer than Fort Collins, closer than Denver, Colorado, things like that. So I get people from Nebraska, I get people from up a little bit north in Wyoming, Laramie, Wheatland, all that stuff. I get people in from a lot of different places. And I've heard from damn near all of them at some point, like, oh, wow, that's cool that you do that. I'm like, yeah, we should be doing that. This should not surprise you. What do you mean that's cool? Like, I see you have a lot of piercings and you've not seen this. What? And it's just terrifying
That's
because with tattoos, people seem to take them a lot more seriously in terms of how clean they have to be. And I'm like, really? Because, like, a tattoo artist, yes, there's the possibility for disease transmission, but they're like scraping you. I'm literally impaling part of you. This seems
yeah.
kind of
You're
pertinent
you're
to
I'm
look
putting
at.
holes in you and then putting stuff in the holes.
Exactly.
So what? Just out of curiosity, what is the most risky of all the piercings that are available to a person?
Oh goodness. You know what? So that's a funny question because that one depends on who you ask. All piercers have some list of no, we don't fucking offer this piercing and this is why. Most of them that
Okay.
I consider to be extremely risky, for whatever reason they are not on the list. Like you'll get like okay, for instance, genital piercings. There's a handful of genital piercings that I do not offer and I will not offer. Like a Princess Albertina is actually a transurethral female piercing, and I refuse to do it because
I'm sorry, a transurethral female piercing.
yeah,
So you're not talking about piercing the hood above the clitoris.
no, no,
What are we?
no. This is
What exactly are you piercing then?
It literally goes through the urethra and comes out higher, obviously much more near like the hood and things like that. Here's my thing. Women are already so prone to bladder infections, UTIs, things like that, just by the nature of the way that we are built and how sensitive our systems are. In good conscience, I can never damn a woman to having one more way for, contaminants, as it were, to get into that area. And even perfectly performed and perfectly healed, that's just one more avenue for, foreign things to get inside of the urethra. And our anatomy is not quite as visually straightforward as a man's. And so it's just, to me, it's not worth the risk of UTIs, bladder infections, things like that for a woman. I know a handful.
So do you don't do Princess Albertinas, but you do Prince Alberts?
Absolutely. So on men, here's the thing: shallow transurethral piercing on men, like your Prince Albert, your reverse Prince Albert, things like that. Those are some of the fastest healing piercings you will ever see in your life. They heal super, super quick. Now that said,
blood travels to the penis. I mean, it's
it's a very vascular area, and of course, I mean, it's a self-cleaning organ. I mean, genitalia is self-cleaning. This is true. But now, as far as male anatomy goes, like deep trans shaft piercings, I won't do because there's just too many unknowns. The anatomy is, frankly, just a little bit over my head, and I won't do it because you can cause very serious bleeding issues with that. You can cause a lot of damage with a piercing like that. True horizontal tongue piercings I won't do.
Going straight through the shaft?
Yes, pretty much anywhere behind where the glans is, I won't go all the way through. There's no way. And I mean, there is a way. People do it, but I do not. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's not something that I feel comfortable doing, and I would rather outright tell a client, I'm not comfortable doing that. Here's the name of a more experienced piercer who may. Then, possibly irreparably fuck up a client, I'll pass on that money today and have you, keep your business intact. True horizontal tongue piercings, there's so many reasons not to do those. And right now the big craze is the snake eyes that they're calling it, which is horizontally right through the tip of the tongue. Oh my God, let me count the ways that's a bad idea.
You're talking about left to right through the meat of the I didn't even know there was a piercing. I've never even seen one of those.
Oh, it's a thing. It is a huge thing right now, and I've pissed off so many clients turning them away for it. But here's the thing. First of all, the tongue is made up of many muscles, but two of the primary muscles that are of concern here are your two lingual muscles. They literally move your tongue. They move the sides somewhat independently, okay? So if you're sticking a piece of literally anything, but typically metal, through that, you're binding them together. So you're basically limiting, and I mean seriously limiting, the movement of your tongue, not to mention the fact that whatever type of jewelry you put in there, when you close your mouth entirely and relax your tongue, in most cases, your tongue is touching your teeth on all sides, right?
Yeah.
Put steel balls on the tip of it. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, you are going to bust out your grill. And that's if you're lucky enough to not rip it out before then, or cause yourself a fucking speech impediment before then. To listen to me talk, most people are not aware of it. I actually have 8 piercings in my tongue. You can do a lot of stuff to your tongue and still talk like people. You can.
You have 8 piercings in your fucking tongue?
Yes, I do.
Jesus. Isn't there's an artery down the middle or something that you want to avoid, right? Or is it a nerve ending?
Well, so there's lots of good vascular stuff throughout your tongue. The bulk of any of the vascular structures that we would be predominantly concerned about don't tend to run smack down the middle of your tongue. So a standard center tongue piercing, which is most commonly what you'll see, it's not really even going through any muscle done properly, because what you do is, you know how you've got kind of that line down the middle of your tongue, right in the middle?
Yeah.
Now, if you ever get a chance, stick your tongue out and sort of pinch that, you'll feel the two primary muscles sort of separate side to side. So you've got this almost little like divot clearing where it's much thinner. That's actually what we're going through for a standard tongue piercing. Now that, again, done properly, you're not actually going through the muscle. You're basically going down through the membrane. Okay, so it's going to cause fairly minimal damage.
The muscles to the side.
Exactly. Now, that said, a lot of my piercings, in fact, four of my piercings, I had to count my tongue, sorry. 4 of my piercings are down the sides of my tongue, so I've got 2 on each side of my tongue. That gets a little trickier because you are directly intersecting those muscles. It can still be done. It can still be done safely because you're not binding them together. Also, with appropriately fitting jewelry, you'll notice you're not hearing a whole lot of clicking as I'm talking as a rule. I don't have a lisp. That's it. Tongue piercings can happen. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is when people are like, oh, well, you'll have a lisp forever. You're going to have a speech impediment. Here's the thing. With a properly placed tongue piercing with appropriately fitting jewelry, you don't have to, obviously.
Right.
But, yeah, you start getting into horizontal work in the tongue, and there's just too many things that we can't see, can't feel, too many unknowns, and also binding together lingual muscles that you need to talk, eat, things that are kind of important in life.
Does that affect your eating?
So right off the bat, right after you get a tongue piercing, we advise that you are looking at 2 to 3 weeks of moderate swelling. So certainly for that first little bit, especially while you're getting used to the sensation of after you feel like you've swallowed all your food, there's still something in your mouth. It's just like new haircut, new glasses, anything like that. It's going to take you time to get used to that sensation. The swelling can certainly be somewhat problematic for some people. I, for instance, every time I've ever gotten my tongue pierced, anywhere I've gotten it pierced, I have just horrific swelling for like 4, and I'm talking my tongue will pucker up around the edges and bruise. It swells so bad. But then after that, it's done. Whereas most people see moderate swelling for 2 to 3 weeks. So I would tell people, eat whatever is going to be comfortable to eat. Probably cut everything into smaller bites. One of the things I directly tell my clients is, until you get more fully accustomed to eating with your tongue piercing, no pasta or SpaghettiOs, anything like that in front of anyone you still want to think you're attractive when you're done. Because that first couple weeks getting used to maneuvering noodles around on your tongue is a little slice of hell. And I am a pasta lover. So I warn my clients that now. Like, I don't care how cute you are or how fancy you feel with your tongue piercing. It's not that cute when you're knuckle deep in your own mouth, gagging on half a noodle that the other half is still wrapped around your bar. So, chew thoroughly, eat slowly, and nothing too spicy because it can irritate the crap out of your tongue. Actually, any fresh oral piercing.
How do you kiss? Like, does that, are you still able to do like
I can still kiss. I can still give head. Yes, I can do all of the desired oral functions because I know you're getting there. In fact, that was the first question you ever asked me.
Right. That's right. I wasn't.
So
I didn't know when I asked you that though that you had 8 tongue piercings. I didn't know that then. Like that makes it all the more like intriguing.
Holy shit, huh?
Yeah, it's impressive that you're able to fit anything in your fucking mouth. It just seems like that would take a lot of room, but I guess it doesn't.
Not a lot, again, because, properly fitted jewelry. But no, I mean, as far as like kissing and things like that, here's the thing. I have had all of the piercings that are currently in my mouth for so long. The only time it dawns on me is when I take everything out to clean it and will go to kiss my husband or even to like kiss one of my kids on the forehead. And I realize how strange it feels all of a sudden because there's so much more like skin contact. And at this point, it kind of weirds me out. Like here a few months back, I had all of my oral piercings out just to run them through an ultrasonic cleaner, get them all nice and fresh. And no shit, I lost track of how many times I put on Carmex that day because I could feel my lips touching, and it was the weirdest sensation to me. Like, everybody giggles when I say that, but it is so strange. And I always tell people, like, just put a fork on your lip and walk around like that all day. How weird that feels to you, that's how weird it feels to me
to not have it.
To have my lips touching each other all day.
That's
I'm like,
so
ooh.
weird.
It is. It's the craziest sensation, and everybody giggles at me too because when I take out all of my tongue jewelry to clean it, I literally will lisp for a good 2 hours until I like relearn how to talk without all the weight on there or something. I don't know what it is. I used to think I was going crazy, and I was like, no, you just think that you sound weird. And then I had somebody call me on it at the shop one day. She was like, what is wrong with you? Like, I literally was questioned whether I had been drinking before work because that is how heavily it impacted my speech, not having them in there. And of course, after a few hours, after a few hours, it cleans itself up. But that first little bit, because of course it becomes second nature to, move your tongue a little differently to make certain sounds and things like that. Then all at once to be making those same motions that you don't realize you've been making all these years without the jewelry there. Now that sounds different. So yeah, it's certainly, for me, the issue was less with getting the piercings and learning how to operate with the piercings as much as it is now when I have to take them out for something, learning how to function without the piercings.
So how often do you have to take them out?
So I generally once a month will take everything out and clean it extremely well. And of course I have my own little methods, like in the shower, because I have so many piercings. I literally have a separate toothbrush set aside just for cleaning around my jewelry. And like TMI alert. So when I brush my teeth, also, it should be noted, and in all fairness, I typically brush my teeth in the shower or bath. But when I'm brushing my teeth, I literally don't stop at the inside of my mouth. I just kind of scrape the lower part of my face to get all the jewelry clean. Because in all fairness, too, it sounds really weird, but man, you've never seen jewelry so shiny and fresh. It's so good. And so I literally use my toothbrush.
Works on your jewelry?
It totally does. So and then of course I also wash my face with my usual cleansers after the fact. But but yeah, so that just kind of gets the lick of the day off. Also, it should be noted, of course, that anything I eat touches my oral jewelry. So I find myself, stepping into the bathroom after a meal, just double check, make sure I don't have anything caught in the roll cage, as we call it. Because nobody wants that. It's gross. It's disgusting. So in part, I've always been very particular about hygiene anyway, but this has definitely stepped it up a notch because now there's extra little places for things to get caught. And yeah, so I actually have a separate toothbrush for, my other facial jewelry, like my bridge, my eyebrow, my nostril, things like that. And it's literally just a little soft toothbrush that I take in my cleanser, and I just get really close right around all of the little jewelry so that there's not getting, dry skin built up around the entrance or exit points, anything like that. I am fairly anal retentive, honestly, about washing my face. Like, it takes me a minute to wash my face because every little thing must be moved and cleaned around. And I hear a lot of stories too from people that are like, oh, I had to take out, and the most common ones I hear are either stretched lobes or septum piercings. And they're like, well, it just stinks. I'm like, then you need to be cleaning it more because it bothers me, like on a spiritual level, to hear people like, yeah, as soon as you stretch your ears, they're just going to stink like that all the time. No, they stink like that because you're not cleaning them properly or often enough, one or the other, possibly both. Because here's the thing, that smell that people are complaining about, where if you've ever been around somebody with heavily stretched lobes and they kind of have that funk to them, what that actually is, it's actually natural bodily oils. It's sebum is what it is. And everybody literally spews sebum out of our pores every day, all day. But here's the thing, if you're not properly taking out your jewelry and cleaning both the tissue and the jewelry, there will be a funk. Like, clean your shit. It's pretty easy. Like, I've never had an issue. Is it
normal for ears that have gauges in them to stink like that?
So that's a two-part question that you did not mean to ask in two parts. It's so it can happen to anybody, but with proper hygiene, I don't care what anybody says, with proper hygiene, you don't have to have that funk. I literally just wash my lobes because every time I wash my face, I take out my tunnels and I wash my lobes themselves as well as my tunnels. That was the second part of that question. So gauges, that terminology is awful. No, it's okay. It's okay. This is good. So everybody says, "Oh, I have gauges," and all as a piercer that I ever hear is, "What gauges are in your gauges, bro?" So a gauge obviously it's a unit of it's a measurement. Okay.
Okay.
So
Right. I knew
the
that.
term gauge, and that's common. Everybody seems to call them gauges. Here's the thing: I wear tunnels,
that's just all I've ever heard them called.
and
What are they called?
people will literally say, "I wear gauges in my gauges," or "I have gauges." I personally wear tunnels in my stretched lobes myself.
Oh, okay. Is
And
that
that's it.
what they're technically called? Tunnels?
So each type of jewelry has its own specific, type. Because like what I wear, it frankly looks like a little spool, and these are tunnels, also called eyelets. You'll hear them plugs. Yeah, there's a lot of different terminology for different styles of jewelry.
You know what? I think I've heard plugs before.
But everybody gets caught up in gauges, and I'm like, no, I don't have. I mean, all of my jewelry has a gauge, but they're not gauged. Or like, oh, it kills me when I have a client. Hey, I was trying to gauge my ears. I'm like, I'm sorry, you were trying to measure them. They're like, what? I'm like, no, you were trying to stretch your ears, sweetheart. And it's so hard to like try to educate clients as to the proper terminology for things without coming off like a complete prick. I try so hard, but I'm like, guys, you're so confusing, because they're like, oh, what gauge are your gauges? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what the fuck did you just say to me? Whereas if you were to be like, hey, how big are your earlobes stretched? I'd be like, oh, 3/4 of an inch. Easy.
Like... And see, I've never heard it called anything else aside from gauges.
Oh my god. I know, and I want to just tell the world.
Aside from what?
Besides gauges, I've always just heard them called gauges. Like that's,
and a lot of people haven't, and it's just incorrect terminology, And we deal with a lot of that as piercers because we get, oh my god, the names people call things. Holy shit!
What other terminology do people is commonly, said wrong?
Oh my goodness! So. One of the things too is, especially in the ears, okay? For instance, in the ear, you have a little fold of cartilage called your tragus. So I get people calling the tragus some really interesting shit. I've been asked about a trachea piercing. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's called murder. Yeah. Unless you're a nurse and saving someone's life.
Right.
I think that's a little above your pay grade.
That's some EMT fucking...
Yes. I'm like, I don't think I'm legally permitted to do that for you. But I could do a tragus piercing for you. We get, oh my god, one of the big ones too is, so there's this now where apparently every set of piercings has to have a name. And so like, there's pretty much a name for any combination of 2 or more oral piercings. And you get into like snake bites was really the first one, and that's been widely industry used. But then they started getting crazy, and you've got everything from spider bites clear up to panda bites, shark bites, T-Rex bites, cyber bites.
What the fuck?
And then, oh my god, right? And then I get my clients coming to me and they're like, oh, how much do you charge for cyber bites? And I'm like, I'm sorry, for what? And then they look at me like I'm the fucking idiot when they could have just told me I want a lip piercing and a philtrum piercing. And then they look at me and go, what's a philtrum? And I'm like, oh my god, you guys call it a Medusa piercing. And like, just the disconnect is astounding because I can't keep up with the weird shit they're calling this shit.
Right.
And then,
where is a philtrum piercing? Just so that I know.
Philtrum piercing. So that your Cupid's bow on your top lip.
Oh, yeah.
Right in the center, that is your philtrum.
And they call that a Medusa?
Mm-hmm. Huh. Yeah, not quite sure where that one came from. And that's one of the more common ones. Really, the biggest ones that just irritate the crap out of me, and I'm sure lots of other piercers, are all the bites. Everything's bites. Like, stop with the bites. It makes me fucking crazy. And I know for a fact I'm not alone, even though I can only speak for myself. It absolutely drives me insane. Like, just tell me you want 2 lip piercings right here. Just tell me you want 2 lip piercings both on the same side. I'll know what you're talking about. Like, people just, oh my god. And it's just this huge craze that everything has to have a freaking name. And I'm like, it already does. It's called anatomy. It's your lip. Calm down. Like, somebody before us named this shit. They did.
Right. You're talking about a world that I have very enlightening to me because I have a grand total of 0 piercings currently.
Right. Well, hey, now you know somebody in the biz.
Right. Exactly. A good friend of mine, I just found out he has something like 22. I can't wait to tell him that I know somebody who could beat him, beat the pants off him on number wise. Like, you thought 22 because you told me 22, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of metal in your body. But
it sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
It does sound like a lot. Not anymore. I think I had a piercing once when I was 14. I went and snuck and got my ear pierced. I thought it would be really cool, and I loved it for the day or two that I had it. I had somewhat long hair. I had hair long enough that I could drape it over my ears and try and cover it. My mother found out about it, and she was okay with it, but the guy who was raising me, Neil, we both knew that he would not approve. And sure enough, one day he saw it. It was only a couple days in, and he was like, "You better take that fucking thing out of your ear." I had no choice, so I had to take it out, and of course it healed up. And I never got another piercing after that. But wow, it's now something I've heard you say before is that you're unique within the industry. Your fellow piercers tend to have a different perspective or view on life and politics than you do.
Yes, on a lot of them actually. And of course, that's not to say that all other piercers except me are exactly the same, because they surely are not. But I have noticed a very large number of them are extremely left-leaning, very, very liberal types. I certainly would not consider myself to be a Republican per se, but I've noticed that most of them are really far down that road to the left, whereas I kind of am a little bit of all over the place. I'm really big on let's legalize weed and let the gays get married and be as miserable as the fucking rest of us. And
I just, not to cut you off, but real quick, I had heard recently, not too long ago, somebody explain that was kind of the new Republican, or the new that was neoconservatism, in the sense that we just don't care about those things anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the old fire and brimstone, Jesus is all, conservative days. It's look, just don't bother me. Don't. I'm not going to bother you. You don't bother me. I don't give a fuck what you do as long as it's not hurting me.
Yeah, like, sort of as hippie as it sounds, like, that's really it. Like, as long as you are not harming someone else, do you, boo. And here's the thing. I, honest to God, could not give a shit less whether the person that I'm dealing with today in my chair or, anywhere else in life is heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, any kind of sexual, because, frankly, unless I'm trying to get down their pants, I really don't care, and it's kind of not my damn business. Like, truly, I don't care. And I think it's great that people are proud to be who they are. That's fantastic, but it's not my business, and I really don't give a shit. I think that we should, I don't know. I was kind of brought up to treat everybody equally until they give me a reason not to, and nobody's ever given me a reason not to based on their sexual orientation. It's always been because they were a rude prick, or because they were an idiot, or something like that. It was never because of where they stick their junk at night. It really never has been.
I grew up a little fairly liberal as well, and I have to admit though that there is a bit of a turnaround perspective-wise for me, just in that, back in the day I was very pro do you, if your thing is, if you like to suck dick and you have a dick, whatever, go for it. If you want to just munch rugs all day, go be you. But I kind of feel like now it's gone overboard. It's gone to the point where it's almost as though that's their entire identity. Like, I get it. I get it. You love dick. You're wearing like a bikini. You've got dicks painted all over you. And you're wearing dick shaped sunglasses, like you and Dick are good friends. I get it. But it's just like, is that all you are? Is it just you and your love of penis? Is there nothing else to you? It's a little too much.
Like, and here's my thing. It's really hard to articulate sort of how I feel about it, because here's the thing is that I don't believe by any means that a person should hide their sexuality or who they are. But I understand what you're saying, where it's like there has to be more to you than the fact that you are attracted to this set of people.
Right, your sexual preference can't be your entire identity.
I mean, and the whole thing is, increasing awareness. Well, that's great. Like, I'm aware that there are people whose sexual preferences differ from mine. That's pretty obvious. Jesus Christ, look at me. That's pretty obvious. But, it just, like, there has to be something else. It's all about accept me for me. Well, it's hard to accept you for you when all I know about you is who you like to sleep with. Like, that's right. All that we know about a lot of these people who are super vocal about it. And again, and it's really hard to try to explain that to somebody without them immediately firing back with, oh, well, we shouldn't have to hide who we are. No, I agree. You shouldn't have to hide who you are. But I was very much, so here's the thing. I was raised in a house that was, again, kind of across the board, and that is firmly reflected in me. My mother would swear up and down that she wasn't racist. She fucking absolutely was. My father was kind of the.
Wait. Do you have the middle-aged white woman who fucking is contradictory on their racism?
Right? Yeah, that was totally my mother. Now here's the thing.
My mom's the same way.
And here's the thing, though, is that my mother would treat everyone with the utmost respect. It did not matter what color they were, didn't matter what they were into, did not matter. But I'll tell you, growing up, my sister and I were very directly told, do not ever procreate with someone who is not white. End of discussion. End of discussion.
Wow.
My sister brought home her boyfriend who was Latino, and my mother, my God, you could feel the discontent pouring off of that woman. She was so sweet to him. She really was. And then, as it turns, now my sister happens to be married to a Latino gentleman, different one, but still a Latino gentleman. And my mother was always very sweet to him. She was very good to him. She loved him very much. Didn't change the fact that her stance was always, you can date them, I guess. Do not breed with them. And that was her words, not mine. Do not breed with them.
Your mother said this?
She did, but until the day that woman died, she'd swear up and down to anybody who would listen, she's not racist, and that is nonsense. And it's garbage, and nobody should be like that because it's hateful and shitty.
God, this is a trope. This is a common trope with how old's your mother?
Oh, geez. She'd have been, she was about 56 when she passed. 56. Oh, and this was just last year.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that. My apologies.
Thank you. No, you're good. But yeah, so I mean, really, and she was like that from the time that I can remember. So there's
I think that's fairly common with that kind of generation, where like the younger generation right now, like I'm 26, there's really no racism in like my generation, but like my parents' generation, that's kind of that transitional period where it's like, yeah, they weren't really raised directly in it, but it still hadn't like really faded from society at that point,
Yeah.
Right. Like, my mother has a unique way of being racist in that she will date and prefers to date men of a dark and dusky complexion. Anywhere from, I mean, the last guy she was dating for years was what was he? Saudi. He was Saudi Arabian. So, like, my sister's half Arabic. The whole thing, but she will sit there, and when we go through neighborhoods that don't look white, like if there's somebody, if she sees a couple of, there's a Latino and a black, and you don't see a white somewhere within the vicinity, she'll click, and the fucking doors get locked. She'll make comments. She'll talk about how they just don't care about their neighborhoods. Like there's just this subtle, not so subtle racism where it's like, okay, so they're good enough for them to fuck you, but then you make these comments, these blanket statements about them. That's just kind of, wow. How do you do that? Like, I mean, like, I don't know. I say shit, but what's that?
That's stellar. That's beautiful. See, and my mother never, to my knowledge, mind you, dated anyone who was not white. And she finally accepted the fact that, either my sister or I eventually might wander, a little deeper than our own skin tone on that spectrum. And that turned into my sister, not myself. I've always dated white men and women. And in fact, I actually got called racist for that the other day. I got called racist because when asked a direct question, I legitimately just stated, like, I have never found myself sexually attracted to someone who did not happen to be white. So that makes me a racist.
When did
now.
That become? This is this new thing now, and it's getting out of control, in my opinion. This idea.
Really is.
Thank you. This idea that your sexual preference is somehow indicative of your racial leanings, whether you're racist or not. Like, that has anything to do with who you find attractive and who you don't. Who is it? There's this YouTuber, Riley Dennis, who's supposedly fucking trans. And this is, I hear this now among the trans community. Not that I'm fucking dialed into that community.
I was like, how many trans people are you friends with? Come on. Auger, who are you trying to lie to? Us or you?
I'm fucking from California. What do you want? So,
You're not
like, there's this idea now that if you don't date trans men or women, it's because you're somehow a bigot. Like, people want straight men typically don't want to fucking date, marry, and make families with other dudes, even if they're dickless. Like, that's just, you know what I mean? And somehow this is turned into, well, that's because you're closed-minded and you're bigoted, and it's just, I don't understand how someone can come
really
to that.
Goes out the window with these people, like, as much as they rail against rape culture and everything, and how consent matters with that. It's like, oh no, if you don't consent to being attracted to these kind of people, well, you're a bad person now. It's like, wait. I thought I was in charge of this. I thought I was in charge of who I screw.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that killed me was, I literally saw this article, and I shit you not. It literally said, study finds that most heterosexual people are not attracted to trans partners. Well, here's the thing. You kind of answered the study in your own hypothesis, in my opinion. And I actually, Auger, have a beautiful quote from this lovely piece of literature I've been reading that ties in flawlessly here, that I would just like to read you real quick, okay?
Okay, all right.
This quote is, when someone interprets as derogatory almost anything that is said about him or about groups with whom he identifies, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong to the minority groups whose rights they defend.
All right, hang on. I've been able to mask all of my the majority of the times that I get kicked, but I can't mask this one. What was the quote again?
Okay, so the quote goes, when someone interprets as derogatory almost anything that is said about him or about groups with whom he identifies, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong to the minority group whose rights they defend.
Which is the whole, which perfectly
I'll tell you,
highlights the whole this white guilt crowd.
I'll tell you, I've been called racist more by white people. I have been called homophobic by more straight people. Guess what? I might be white. I also happen to be a switch hitter. And it just tickles me in very special places inside every time I get called a homophobe, because I think of every woman I've ever been in bed with. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if they knew that I was homophobic. I wonder if they knew that.
Like if you raised your head
should I call them?
You were disgusted the whole time.
Yeah, should I call those girls and be like, oh, hey, just FYI, I'm homophobic.
Faggots.
It's been real and it's been fun, but it has not been real fun. I'm going to have to bid you adieu now because I'm a homophobe. What? Jesus Christ. And I have yet to actually be called homophobic by someone who is anything but heterosexual. And I'm pretty sure I've been referred to as racist by people who are not solidly white, but the points that really stick out for their absurdity were the ones who were white. So that quote really tickled me. And in fact, that quote came from a piece of literature that, as I understand, you wanted to discuss this evening, in case you did not recognize it.
Right. I knew you were going there. So that quote came from specifically what now?
That quote came from Industrial Society and Its Future, written by Theodore John Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber Manifesto.
The Unabomber. No, I haven't had a chance to get my hands on that transcript and start reading it, but I desperately want to. But I did.
Right now, I just have to make a quick moment to call out Joel. Joel, I love you so much for the picture you just put in the chat. You don't even know how giddy that just made me feel inside. You don't even know. It's a picture of Kaczynski with this great big shit-eating grin, and it says, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything."
It's the Colin Kaepernick Nike ad.
It's beautiful. No, now it's a Kaczynski Nike ad, and that might make me buy Nike.
No, I'm saying, it's referencing that.
No, I still wouldn't because it's a crap product.
Who was that?
That's courtesy of our buddy McIntyre, by the way.
Thank you, McIntyre.
You're the
beautiful. Oh, I need all of these sent to me. These are exquisite. Thank you.
Did you see the pictures of that guy? Who posted that?
Hey! Let's not be getting touchy on David Koresh here. Let's leave Koresh out of it.
Who? Oh, you must be paying attention to the chat.
Sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Right. So I guess some guy protesting the whole Nike thing, and I guess a bunch of people are, but he decided, I guess people are throwing away their shoes or trashing them, but he decided to light his on fire
on his feet.
He's wearing them.
That kills me. I actually made a post about it earlier. Here's the thing. The people who are really on their high horse about this whole Colin Kaepernick thing are screaming about, veterans and homeless veterans. Go give your fucking Nikes to them then. You fucking cunts. What are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
I've never worn Nike because here's the thing. After I worked in shoe sales, I can tell you that those shoes are crap. They are garbage. They are injection molded garbage. Now, all these fucking people super concerned about it, Nike has a very long history with fucking sweatshops, for one thing. That should be a good reason to not buy their shit. The product line is garbage. That would be another good reason not to buy it. But now, all of a sudden, it's all about Colin Kaepernick, and then it's getting twisted around, and everyone's like, oh, it's because Colin Kaepernick's black. I'm like, here's the thing. I was upset about the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. Do you know why? Because when I sit down to watch football on the rare occasion I want to watch football, not a fucking political statement. Keep it out of our sport. It's one of the few mindless things we have left. Let us enjoy it. But that aside, why are we burning our fucking shoes? We've already spent money on it. You're not teaching Nike a lesson. You're burning shit that you already own. Stop.
Right. They already have your money.
Get rid of it and stop buying it. Also, a company that big, they have risk management departments, whole departments. They fucking know what they're doing. Guess what? Every time somebody's posting about it, guess what they're doing? They're advertising fucking Nike for free. Good job, guys. Nike still wins. You're not hurting anyone except your damn self. Sit down and go donate your shoes to somebody. Kills me.
Veterans, for that matter.
Yes, fuck.
Right. So I saw a thing, and I posted it from the House of Auger show page. I saw a thing that showed that Nike's stock had dropped something like $4 billion since the ad went up, and that was like earlier today, this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard since then it's dropped $10 billion, which to me, when I hear the number 10 billion, that sounds like a significant drop. But apparently,
it sounds made up.
It's not apparently. That's a legitimate. Their stock has dropped 10 billion in
Josh, let me interrupt since I've got pulled up the numbers. His drop, that's the market cap, is what. So their total value of the company dropped by $4 billion. But when you're
I know where you're going with this because I just learned this.
Yeah, it's only, I think the drop was only 2.6%. So in the big grand scheme of things, it's actually a fairly
not that
small. Big. Yeah, it's not really that big.
Are you a forensic accountant?
Kind of a jack.
Yeah, so I took that thing and I posted it from the House of Auger show, and I posted it in a bunch of groups, and I guess, fucking Wall Street guys or day traders or people involved in stock and whatnot who know a great deal more than I do, which is incredibly easy to do when it comes to that stuff. We're like, yeah, this is not a big deal. And I was like, it's not? It's $4 billion. They're like, dude, it's nothing. It's like a drop in the bucket percentage wise. And I was like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, dude, Nike's big. I was like, oh okay. I thought it was funny. I was like, damn, dude, that's $10 billion. And like, for me, that's fucking unfathomable. But I guess for a company that size, that really is nothing. Like Joel was saying. Thank you for interjecting with that, Joel.
Sure thing.
So yeah, but we have strayed from the topic. We were going to talk about an industrial society and its future, or actually, it's just industrial society and its future, isn't it?
Correct. It is. It is.
Now, I did some research on Kaczynski, and I learned a lot that I guess I wasn't paying much attention at the time. This was back in the early 90s, early mid 90s when this was all going down.
When he was caught for it, yes.
Right, when he was caught for it. And so I thought that it was a new thing. Like, I thought he stepped onto the scene in the 90s. Oh,
God, no.
Right. See, I didn't know that. He'd been doing these bombings since back in the 70s.
Correct.
And I guess he's maimed, I don't know, like 11 people, killed 3.
Mm-hmm. Wounded 23, I believe, was the actual number. Wounded 23. Killed 3, wounded 23.
Right, and all of them were people that he felt kind of embodied what he saw as the problem.
Correct. Now, for anyone who is not at all familiar with Kaczynski's writings, and I'm limiting this conversation purely to this specific essay. I often call it a book, but let's be honest, it's an essay. It really, the big thing, and this is a common theme throughout his writing, is technology. It's technological society. And one of the, in fact, specifically because I was made to read this writing as a child, not child, obviously, but I was probably about 11 years old when my father brought me a copy of the manuscript and made me read it. Which now I'm aware that it's not necessarily like 11-year-old reading material, but it was in there and it was fun. One of the things, and upon rereading it recently, this one quote really stuck out to me and made me take the whole thing a lot more seriously because I couldn't think of any way in which this specific statement was incorrect. That statement was, freedom means having power, not the power to control other people, but the power to control the circumstances of one's own life. That spoke to me in such a serious way because right now, and it's interesting too that right now this literature is more relevant to society right now than ever.
And this was written, or at least it was published in the Washington Post. What, 95, 93?
Mm-hmm. But correct. Well, he actually wrote it in 93. It was originally published in 95.
Okay, that was my next question. I wasn't sure when he actually finished writing it. I just know that he got them to publish it in the Washington Post.
Right. And one of the things that really bothers me is to hear people say, well, he wanted to kill people. No. Ted Kaczynski, his IQ is 172. It took us 20 years to catch him, and we only caught him because his brother turned him in. If that man's goal was killing people, it wouldn't have been 3 people, guys. First of all. Second of all, there's actually a little spot in paragraph 96. You're good. The tail end of paragraph 96 literally says, in order to get our message before the public with some chance of making a lasting impression, we, FC, stands for Freedom Club, we've had to kill
that's
people.
What he would refer to himself as.
Yes.
And he always referred to himself as though they were a terrorist organization, as though it were more than just him.
So, and here's the thing, is that in legal terms, Ted Kaczynski has been branded a domestic terrorist. And I've been really researching this a lot lately. Within about a 300-mile radius of where I currently sit, in almost every single bookstore or library I can find, I can walk in and pull off of the shelf a copy of Mein Kampf, of the Communist Manifesto. I have to special order Industrial Society and Its Future. I have to special order Technological Slavery. I have to special order anything that was ever written by Ted Kaczynski. Why is it that my 9-year-old can walk in and get a copy of Mein Kampf, but not this?
Right. When we brought that up, you and I have discussed this to some extent before. And the last time we discussed that, I don't remember who it was who brought this up, but I thought it was apropos. The difference between the two, Mein Kampf and an Industrial Society and Its Future, is Mein Kampf it teaches you from a government's perspective how to control its people, whereas with Industrial Society and Its Future, it teaches a person how to tear down its own government.
Not entirely accurate. So while that's the drawn in crayons version of it, it actually expressly states.
Leave it to me to draw a crayon.
Yeah, good job. It's like turning your phone down. So here's the thing, is that it expressly states a number of times in this manuscript that this is not intended to be a political revolution. This is really, it's about a societal revolution, because it's not just the government, it's technology as a whole.
Right. It's, from what I understand, his message, his perspective had to do with how the advancement of technology, as technology advances, the more it advances, the more we become enslaved to it.
Correct, because the basic theory is this. Okay, at first, it's really nice to have a car. Now we've got all this freedom. Well, now we've built up our cities to where you essentially have to have some type of motorized transport. Now we've built it so that we've got speed limits. You have to have a license. There's taxes. There's all this. So with that little speck of freedom that sold everybody on this item, now there's all these extra rules and all this extra governing that is happening. Just like with basically any other device. Now we've got TVs in our homes. This is nice. This is fun. This is mindless entertainment. Well, now they're using, and this is not a theory. This is not some paranoid, conspiracy shit. They are using subliminal messaging in our advertisements and in our programs to make us buy things, to make us act a certain way, to make us, do things. And so with that freedom, there's also that control. And here's the thing, there's no amount, as Kaczynski asserts, of freedom that these things are granting us that is worth what they're taking away, because it only looks like freedom at first. And, there's a lot of it that honest to God.
Benefit ratio.
Yeah. And here's the thing, I can't argue with a lot of what is in here, because he's not wrong. He's not.
And as far as I understand, that was I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. And I was just going to, again, make the point that here's the thing, people that I have had read sections of this without telling them where it's from or who wrote it are genuinely like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's totally right on. And what cracks me up is a lot of it is the people who are actually doing these things. They're the people pushing, they're the science types, the government types. And I'm like, you are literally the problem here. And even you can recognize when you don't realize it's talking about you, or that it was written by the Unabomber, you're like, oh, that's a really good point. Well, yeah, it sure the fuck is. Stop looking at who's writing it and start looking at the writing. And I think that a lot of people can do really well just to read this. And I'm not saying everybody needs to jump on in and go support Ted Kaczynski. I'm not saying let's start this revolution tomorrow. But what I'm saying is, genuinely, if you ever find yourself with a few minutes and the desire to expand your knowledge base a little bit, pick up a copy of this, read it with an open mind, and just see how you feel about it. I'm very interested in, excuse me, in seeing, what people are thinking about it, because the people that I've had read it are completely blown away by the time they realize what I've just had them read, or in some cases, what I've just read to them. I've exposed a lot of people to this, and I've exposed people that I'm like, oh, you're totally going to be on board. And then I've looked at other people like, oh, you're going to hate this shit, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. And I've not had a single person that is like, oh my God, that's insane. What are you talking about? This is heresy. Most of them are like, oh my God, that is so true. I'm like, yeah, I know. Now, here's your about the author page. And so it really is impressive to me that people are, they're receptive to the information when it doesn't come from the Unabomber. Now, here's the thing. Even in my edition of this essay, I'm going to read you about the author because this pisses me off. Theodore John Kaczynski, born May 22, 1942, Evergreen Park, Illinois, U.S., is the American criminal who conducted a 17-year bombing campaign that killed 3 and wounded 23 in an attempt to bring about a revolution against the industrial system. First of all, a revolution against the industrial system is written in quotations, which reads very mocking to me, first of all. Second of all, for everything that this man accomplished, for everything that this man accomplished, this is what we've got it boiled down to on the About the Author. This is why people don't take this shit seriously, because they cannot separate the fact that they're reading something that was written by the Unabomber. Stop reading from the Unabomber and start reading from Theodore Kaczynski, who was in Harvard at 16 years old. Was anyone in this chat in Harvard at 16? I sure fucking wasn't.
Right. And that's that's something a lot of people don't know either, is that he was in Harvard at 16. He's a very accomplished mathematician, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. And more to the point, it's apparently been documented and confirmed that he was part of an experiment with MK Ultra, which, for anybody who knows anything about conspiracy theories, MK Ultra was one that for a long time was dismissed as being hogwash and ridiculous, but it's a real thing. Like MK Ultra was a legitimate CIA experiment or project, as it were, that had very many offshoots. And he was involved in one of these. Am I still there?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yep. He was involved in an experiment regarding this with the CIA, with one of the Harvard professors there, where he was, I think, he underwent intense one-on-one therapy sessions where this professor really delved into what this kid thought and felt and his views and perspectives. This kid being, Ted, and then was subjected to.
And he's gone.
He's gone.
And here's what I always say when somebody brings up the whole experiments to me, because most people will word it as, well, the government fried his brain. Well, since by the time the government actually physically got a hold of him, he had this IQ that was literally higher than Stephen Hawking's, by the way. And frankly, as a brilliant man, and people might argue that with me, but that is wholeheartedly my feelings on the matter. It would be horrifying to see what he could have come up with before they quote unquote fried his brain. Because this is obviously a man who was on a mission and who had a lot of things he wanted to accomplish. And man, oh man, let me tell you, reading through this is not the writings of some psychotic hermit, which is where a lot of people write it off. To sit and read little, bits and pieces, one paragraph at a time, eventually you could kind of be like, okay, this guy sounds a little out there. But if you sit down and allow yourself the few hours to read this essay start to finish, I mean, these are not the ramblings of some psychotic, brain fried government project.
No, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I was gone. What was the last thing I was saying?
You were on about MK Ultra.
Right. So did I Did I finish describing what they did to Ted?
Essentially, yes.
Right. So they put it through all that ridicule and everything, and it was so extensive. This attempt to break him down, just to rebuild him, sort of a mind control experiment, as it were, and that had to be devastating on a 16-year-old boy, especially somebody who was already sort of isolated and had difficulty connecting with people. And here was this professor who he spent so much time with, intimately, kind of going into his thoughts and feelings, and to feel betrayed in that way, I find it almost impossible when I think about Kaczynski to separate that event and that 16-year-old boy from his eventual life's path. Oh,
absolutely.
I can't see those two. One follows the other. I can't see them being separated.
See, and that actually makes me think there was a very specific, another quote from Ted Kaczynski when he was asked in an interview whether he was concerned, and I don't remember exactly how the question was worded, forgive me, but I do have the specific quote of his response here. But the question was something along the lines of whether he was scared that they were going to break his spirit upon his incarceration. And what he said was fairly brilliant. He said, no. What worries me is that I might, in a sense, adapt to this environment and come to be comfortable here and not resent it anymore. I am afraid that as the year goes by, that I may forget. I may begin to lose my memories of the mountains and the woods, and that's what really worries me. And I might lose those memories and lose that sense of contact with wild nature in general. But I am not afraid they are going to break my spirit. And I thought that was also really just so interesting. I mean, this man is completely fascinating to me.
Feared Stockholm Syndrome more than anything else.
Yep, and I think that might go back.
His incarceration.
Yes, and I think that may go back to sort of what Auger was talking about with these, what this professor did to him and, everything that has happened. And then you've got to look at the fact also that, again, it was his brother who turned him in. I mean, this man is a study in you obviously can't fucking trust anyone. So it's really, not to play
from his perspective, he had been betrayed by everyone he ever got close to, and that had to have a profound effect on him, considering how difficult it was for him to ever really get close to anyone. He was very isolated, and that's what that's what fascinates me too. Is I ended up watching at Mac's suggestion that mini series they made, Manhunt Unabomber.
Yes,
great mini series. I found it fascinating that whoever wrote and produced that, it was done with sort of a balanced perspective. It definitely lent itself to a sort of empathy and sympathy for Kaczynski, while also not trying to downplay the fact that what he did truly is wrong, not only wrong, but a little that's a little crazy to it's one thing to have a message, it's another to isolate yourself and go through all the trouble he did to try and all of this, the getting on a bus for 3 days to mail a package bomb to somebody, to pick his targets, to all of this for 17 years just so that he could get that fucking message out, that manuscript. And that's a little crazy.
Right. Now here's what I'll say about that. And here's my take on that. A lot of that feeling, and of course, yes, it was out there, but here's the thing. Think about this, Auger. If you had a message and if you knew something that you genuinely believed everyone else needed to know, that you genuinely believed would save people in the long run, how far would you go to deliver that message?
Right, and I understand
and that's what you have to look at. No, I'm not saying the guy was right in what he did. However, here's the thing. No one was listening to him. Now, I have, and I've kind of tossed around in my head, and I actually recently sent off a letter to Ted Kaczynski. God knows if he'll read it or write back. But I asked him a very pertinent question. I wanted to know how he felt about the work of Nikola Tesla, because to me the two are so similar. It's kind of alarming because if you look at government and media discrediting a fucking genius to make him look like a psycho, go look at Tesla. Right. That's not conspiracy. That's what fucking happened. And it was because Tesla had a way to basically give the whole world free energy that was clean and non-harmful to basically everything. That's when the government was like, okay, this guy's crazy. Let's start making him look crazy now. So there's certainly questionable aspects to Kaczynski's methods, but how much of that is exacerbated by what we get told? Because now, if you know for a fact, well, this brilliant man right here went and did all of these things, well, that was noble. But if it's a crazy person, it's crazy. It's kind of like that whole 50 Shades of Grey was only romantic because it was, in a mansion. If that were in a trailer park, it would be a Criminal Minds episode. It's kind of the same thing. And that's it. That's it. And my biggest thing for everyone would be truly and sincerely, with an open mind, sit down, read this essay, period. Try to ignore who's written, right? And check it out.
I think the government succeeded in that regard in making sure if indeed you take the perspective or position that this is a message that the government does not approve of, does not want out there, is actively opposed to, then what they did succeeded in suppressing that message. Because definitely, like you're talking about, people see his writings and him tied together. You can't. Yeah. People are it's almost impossible for most people to even consider what you're saying, to separate the two from each other. The man who committed those atrocities, and legitimately, that's, as much as we want to romanticize the man, and I do, I genuinely, I have empathy for him, and I find him to be a fascinating person, but he's also a murderer. Like that, and that, I think it's curious to me how we romanticize people who do those things. Which brings me.
Here's the thing. I was told from a very young age by my mother that my job in life was to love the unlovable. And let me tell you, the woman was not wrong. I get accused constantly of romanticizing horrible, horrible, horrible people. And where I'm quite sure your segue was heading, I have quite the fascination with serial killers. Right. And here's the thing, though. You can't even, and as much as I love my Bundys and my Ramirez's of the world, here's the thing. Ted Kaczynski wasn't killing for possession or for ownership. And I think, and I would love to revisit this conversation with you, Auger, after you've actually read the whole manifesto. Because
yes,
you might
definitely.
see what I'm talking about a little
bit.
We'll
have to do our homework before next time.
What was that?
We'll have to do our homework before next time.
Yes, but here's the thing. It was very much, it was mission oriented, and it could be, and I'm not saying this is how I feel about it, but I'm saying that one could potentially compare calling Ted Kaczynski a murderer to calling a soldier in war a murderer. Just for perspective. I'm not saying soldiers are murderers. I'm not saying Ted Kaczynski's not a murderer. I just like to throw out little fun bits of perspective, like saying that those two sentences and sentiments could be pretty similar coming across the appropriate lips. That said, I do tend to romanticize my serial killers a little bit. But I've noticed as a rule that as we as a society are studying serial killers, we look at two things. We look at what they've done, and we look at their childhood. And it's a cop-out. It's bullshit. To say that, so-and-so was abused as a child and this is why they grew up to be a murderer is total nonsense. There are perfectly decent human beings out there who have never harmed another human intentionally a day in their life, who were viciously abused as children. There are killers out there who were among the absolute most vicious and brutal and vile, Ted Bundy, who were not reportedly abused as children. So where I get accused of romanticizing serial killers, aside from the art that I do featuring my serial killers, is the fact that I am interested not only in what kind of childhood they had, but beyond. Like, what were they thinking? It's not just I think that the why is not so simple as were you beaten as a child. I think that we have to accept that there are monsters in this world that walk among us, some of whom were just born wired wrong and they were going to get there, and some
That's
of whom
funny. I say
were
the same thing.
legitimately made. And in my opinion,
I use that same terminology. Was all I was going to say. The wiring, people come out of the factory with faulty wiring, or wires get crossed.
Exactly. And sometimes they're wired that way. Sometimes the wires get crossed somewhere along the way. And my personal favorite serial killer is Ted Bundy. He, to me, is one of, by and far, the absolute most interesting. But
now, what makes him the most interesting to you?
His victimology, hands down, his victimology. You look at you look at a lot of these high body count serial killers. One of the first ones that'll come to mind stateside is going to be Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, which, by the way, Ted Bundy gave them valuable information toward catching, even though it took him another goddamn 10 years after he died. But here's the thing. You look at somebody like Ridgway, whose body count is, literally, 30 plus, and they were hookers. These are high-risk victims. High-risk victims are going to be your sex workers, your drug addicts, things like that. People who, by the nature of the way that they live, already just to exist, are existing in a sort of a danger zone where it's easy to pick them off because people aren't going to miss them. You look at Albert Fish. Yes, you look at Albert Fish going back a few years. Albert Fish was a cannibal and he took children. Now, in the times around which Albert Fish was operating, he was taking children who were either mentally or physically disabled, or children who were typically in that area, because he operated in and around Brooklyn. And so he was taking children who were either handicapped mentally or physically, or who were Black. Here's the thing, in those days, because you're looking, 20s and 30s, okay? In those days, nobody looked for those kids. That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, right. In those days, nobody's looking for those kids because you just saved that, and as heartless as this sounds, it is the fact of the matter. You just saved that family a whole lot of trouble. And in the case of the Black children, nobody's looking for them. Nobody gives a shit. It's a Black kid missing. Who gives a shit? Yeah. So Albert Fish was smart, and he was taking a different set of high-risk victims. But there's all these sets of high-risk victims. Whereas you're looking at Theodore Bundy, who was taking typically college-age girls from right in front of their home. Right, he was literally in Lake Sammamish in Washington State. He was very cocky, but he was very good at what he did. I mean, the man went in.
That's debatable. I only say that because yes, it is undeniable that he was a cut above. He was very intelligent. His law background gave him extensive knowledge and understanding of kind of where to step and where not to legally, with the cops and things. But there was an extreme amount of luck considering the time frame. You didn't have the interdepartmental connections that you do now with the legal system, with the judicial system.
You know why we have those now?
Partly because of him and people like him.
Not partly. That's thanks to Ted Bundy.
Is it primarily because of him?
That is because of Ted Bundy. Before him, because he was
to Utah, to Ohio,
Washington, Utah, Colorado. And he went to Florida after he escaped imprisonment in Colorado for the second time. So let me tell you, if I'm ever going to get arrested anywhere, I'm going to goddamn Colorado.
It's so funny how he really changed the way they looked at criminals. Because
he changed everything because he wasn't this creep hiding in the shadows.
Right.
He wasn't,
he was handsome,
and that's it.
He was upstanding.
That was our first taste.
College background. Yeah.
That was our first taste of the, that handsome guy across the hall who bought you a drink that one time and was a perfect gentleman. He did that about 20 minutes before he went somewhere else and cut a girl's head off and then went back and made sweet, sweet love to her corpse for the next several weeks until there was nothing left.
He would go back and put makeup on them, on their corpses. It's very strange. Very strange behavior.
Absolutely would. And here's the thing. Like I said, we actually have, as fucked off as this statement is about to sound, we have Ted Bundy to thank for a lot of things that we do now that we take for granted in our generations. Now, if you, right now, Auger, if you were to go ask your mother if her parents ever told her, because here's the thing, my generation, we were all told, if you ever get pulled over by a cop or anything like that, or if a cop approaches you, wait until you're in a well-lit area. Look for a badge. Look for this. Look for that. Show, make them show identification. Your mother was not told that by her mother. You know why? Because of Officer Roseland, which was Ted fucking Bundy.
Yep.
We weren't told things like that. Right. So, I mean, and we didn't think of, these vicious rapists and murderers as, anything other than that fucking creepy guy over there in the corner looking at me all fucked up. It was that guy who was really handsome and well-dressed and well-spoken and, the kind of guy that you really were kind of looking forward to being able to take home to mom and show off a little bit. And now, all at once, it's Ted Bundy. In fact, right now, the absolute best book I've ever read on the subject is The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. Now, Anne Rule was she had already signed the deal to write the book about the quote-unquote Washington murders before Ted Bundy was ever a suspect. Anne Rule was friends with Ted Bundy. She knew him very well. They worked together at a crisis call center. The man sat there every night telling people, no, don't kill yourself. It gets better. And the running joke is, no, ma'am, please don't kill yourself. Give me your address. I'll be there in a few minutes. But truly, and that's it. Everybody that you asked about him, anybody that you asked about him who knew the man was like, no, there's no way that's our Ted. That's ridiculous. That's ludicrous. You would never do that. Because he was always noted to be quite the gentleman and very chivalrous, very sweet, very polite,
well-spoken,
fun to be around, total gas. And that's it.
That's what led to him being able to escape. At least the first time. I mean, he managed to convince them to leave him in a room,
in the law library,
unchained,
in the law library. Yep.
Yeah, unsupervised with a fucking open window. Like, he even says it. He's like, I saw the window and I thought, well, I'm ready to go. So
yeah, and then when they recaptured him, he proceeded to ask his attorney if he happened to see the person that pushed him out the window, and that's it. Ted Bundy, even when shit was the most awful for him, he always find a way to crack a joke and make himself super likable. I know people who are not serial killers, who are not that likable. It astounds me that he managed to be that likable. And it's well noted that he had just an entourage of women at every one of his trials. And to speak to how good the man was, here's the thing. There are still bodies of his victims that they have not found. It's 2018.
Well, what's funny is when he, I forget who, I think it might have been a reporter. Somebody asked him, did you do this? And he said, well, I think the guy's name was Glenn. Well, Glenn, if and when you finally catch the guy who did this, because, that's what it was. The reporter said, did you kill something like, what was it, 36 women that they had come up with in 4 different states?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, Glenn, if you do finally catch the guy who did this, I think you'll find that his victims range in the 3 digits, and it's 6 states.
He actually said to him, Add a digit to that, and you'll have it. Now, here's what everybody wants to know. Where does that digit go? Does that put him at 136? Does that put him at 360? Where does that extra digit go? And that's one of the great questions that Ted Bundy has left behind. And as recently as like 5 years ago, they were reopening a cold case because they might have been able to link it to Ted Bundy.
Is that right?
Serious as a heart attack. The man was arrested for the last time in Florida in 1979. He was put to death in 1989. And he even was, toward the end of it there, trying to bide time because, you know, Ted was a lot of things, but stupid wasn't one of them. You know, he was giving them little tidbits about, you know, where might you find this body? Where might you find this? And it impresses me listening through some of his interviews that a lot of times these people didn't even catch when he was playing them. I mean, the man was so charming and so slick.
There's no doubt about that. He was very
incredible. It's incredible.
Very charming.
And, you know, I find the man absolutely, absolutely fascinating. He is by and far my favorite. And like I said, one of the big things to that was because this is another one, it's going to sound super fucked up. There's a certain laziness to taking high-risk victims. Like, you've got your Gary Ridgways of the world that are out taking sex workers. That's great, but it's a high-risk victim. Walk into a college campus, which, by the way, now you couldn't do because now college campuses are very secured. Thank you, Ted Bundy. Yeah, thanks, Ted. You know, and there's cameras everywhere. There's all this. That wasn't a thing then. It wasn't because it didn't have to be, because if you weren't a hooker or a junkie, you were safe. Well, Ted Bundy showed us that, you know, you don't have to look for the guy that looks out of place. You don't have to be a junkie or, you know, a prostitute. You can just be, you know, Georgianne Hawkins at the beach or what have you. No, I'm sorry. Georgianne was not taken from the beach. She was taken from her college. But then toward the end there.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but, you know, and then once he finally culminated everything with the Chi Omega house, I mean, Jesus Christ, the things that this man did to his victims were horrific. I mean, they were absolutely obscene.
His violence and capacity for violence was just...
It was impressive. I'm going to call it what it is. It was impressive. I can't find a better word for it.
It's a bit horrific. I don't impressive, yes, but I don't think that alone really does it justice for just how. I mean, the amount of damage he did to those women in that fraternity house. I mean, he left them all he was using was a fire log, right? It was
10 minutes.
Yeah. Yes. And he went from room to room.
Yeah, and he was in there 10 minutes.
I think he killed, what was it, 2 or 3 women?
He killed 2 and very seriously damaged 2 others. And then he went to an apartment basically right across the way and tore it up again. And I mean, that's it. The man. Yes, and here's the other thing too, is that you also have to look at the fact that at Lake Sammamish in Washington State, he went there, lured one girl to his car, broad daylight, lured one girl to his car, and now it's arguably he either killed and disposed of her real quick and then came back, or just stored her away and then came back.
Yeah.
There's conflicting reports, and obviously we can't ask either of the girls. In fact, everybody that was involved that day is now dead, so we can't ask anybody who was there.
I mean,
but
it's fucking insane.
He literally went back less than 4 hours later and got another one.
Another girl.
And he did. Now, mind you, at this point, and that area, they knew that there was a predator. They knew everybody was supposed to be on guard. They knew that this person was driving this type of vehicle. If this does not tell you how genuinely good this man was at what he was doing, Jesus Christ, if I could be as good at luring women to death, I mean, if I could be as good at literally anything in my life as Ted Bundy was at luring women to their death, I would be a fucking billionaire. No shit. I mean,
it's a combination not only
good at, but holy fuck, come on.
Right. I think it's a combination not only of his skill at what he was doing, and he. I have to say, I think it's his confidence more than anything. You've heard the adage about, if you want people to think that you belong somewhere, just pick up a clipboard.
Oh yeah, it's dressed for the job you want.
Right, which refers to the whole aspect of you have to look like you belong. It has to feel right, and exude. Another way to do that is just to simply be comfortable and confident in whatever situation or environment you're in. That was his key, in my opinion. That's what set him above, and really was the contributing factor in a lot of the situations that allowed him to do what he was ultimately doing. Was the fact that he just was so calm and comfortable. Like, yeah, hey, how you doing, guys? I'm here to kill some of you. Like,
hey, what's up? Yeah, hey, do you want to help my crippled ass to my car with some books? Let's do the thing.
Right. And it boggles my. And he did that almost like a game, like a test, because he was telling people his name. At that lake, like, how you doing? I'm Ted. Yeah, come with me. Like, I mean, no regard for fucking any sort of security for himself. Just
none.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna do this.
Well, and that's it. Here's the thing: when are you the outdoorsy type? Have you ever been hunting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you be concerned about telling that deer your name before you shot it?
Right. No,
you wouldn't.
not at all.
You're not thinking of the end game. You're thinking about what her head's going to look like on a pike. You're not thinking about witnesses. You're thinking, "Oh, this is fun. I can do this thing." And Ted flat out said that it was about possession with him. It was because he wanted to have them, and have them he did for weeks on end in most cases. And that's it. And
he even committed acts of necrophilia.
That was actually one of his biggest things. In fact, to listen to his girlfriend at the time, who also turned him in, by the way, all these poor Teds getting turned in by people close to them. When she turned him in, they were questioning her sex life. And in my opinion, Ted was absolutely a 10 necrophile. I mean, unquestionably. Obviously, he was class 9, but I think toward the end, he was whittling down toward a true class 10 necrophiliac, which is so rare.
I'm not familiar with the classification.
Oh, okay. So, necrophilia, for anybody not paying attention, is
fucking the dead.
Some sort of, not always. That's the classic sense, but there are 10 classes of necrophilia. Your class 1 are like your role players or your fantasizers. Your class 1s may enjoy sex with a person who is just pretending to be dead.
That's weird.
You have your class 2s. Oh, it gets weird. You've got your class 2s, your romantic necrophiles. And these are people who have lost a loved one, and they may.
What is a romantic necrophile?
It's a class. I'm explaining. Jeez.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sure. I'm explaining the class.
I love that combination
of goodness. Yes. So, here's the thing. Romantic necrophiles, they're typically the one who has, like, for instance, widowers, things like that. They are known to actually potentially keep parts of the body of their recently departed loved person, and they keep it with them for sexual stimulation. Now, that said, if they were cross paths with another dead body, they wouldn't be like, "Oh, I hit that with a stick." It's just that specific person. Then you've got your class 3, which are specifically your fantasizers. Your class 3s are going to fantasize about having sex with a corpse. They are known to visit like funeral homes, cemeteries, things like that, and often get caught masturbating in the presence of the dead. And then, of course, you've got your class 4s. Those are like your touchy types. Their interest in a corpse will increase to touching them. They may stroke erogenous zones of the corpse, like breasts, things like that. They could potentially also manipulate or play with sexual organs of the corpse to achieve sexual gratification for themselves. Your class 5s are your fetishistics. They are typically the ones that are going to, like, cutting up parts of a body and keeping it and kind of use it just sort of as like sort of their spank bank, to be honest. And these are separate from the class 2s in that your class 2s, it directly has to be someone with whom they were romantically linked in life. Whereas your class 5s, doesn't matter, that's a body, I like it, I'm taking this part of it and keeping it. You've got your class 6, which are the necromutilomaniacs. These guys are not pleased with just touching them. They are more along the lines of actually mutilating the corpse for their gratification. Your class 7s. Now, class 7 through 10 is where the actual sexual activity with the dead starts, to be clear. So only class 7 through 10. Right. Class 7 are your opportunistics. They typically will, so they're content to have sex with a living partner, but if they came across a good enough looking corpse, they would probably hit that too. Okay. And then you've got your class 8s, your regular or classic necrophiles. They don't tend to enjoy sexual activity with living and actually prefer corpses. However, they can still have sex with both, but they much prefer the dead. You've got your class 9s, which is where we get into Teddy. Let's see here. Your class 9s are your homicidal necrophiliacs. This is considered the roughest category because these are the ones who will, much like the name states, will actually kill in order to have sex with a corpse. Okay.
Obviously, so falls into that category as well, then.
Yes, Tomer does. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then finally, you've got your class 10s. They are the exclusive necrophiles. They are the type that can only sexually perform with a corpse. They cannot perform with a living partner anymore. Now, Ted Bundy's girlfriend, who turned him in, flat out told them, like, there were times he would make me pretend I was dead, and that was the only way that he could perform. So that statement right there, and that was a little bit earlier on, that was well before the Florida incident, of course, with Chi Omega. That puts him basically at like a class 8, conservatively, as a classic necrophile. Right. You know, someone, and that's it. So my personal opinion is that by the time it was all said and done in Florida, I'm pretty sure he crossed over into class 10. Now, I've had people argue that with me because, of course, at one point while he was incarcerated in Florida, he did actually have sex with Carol Ann Boone, his wife, and subsequently impregnated her. So obviously he performed well enough. But I believe that he was definitely, at the very least, leaning heavily toward that class 10.
It's so interesting to me.
And that's way more than you ever wanted to know about fucking dead bodies, huh?
It's really not. Like, I'm fascinated. I didn't even know there were classifications.
Oh yeah.
I guess I never delved into it that much. I'm
Nothing is black and white. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you know what they say, dead girls don't say no, but you should still bring them flowers.
Necrophilia, just lay back and crack open a cold one.
Damn right. What red-blooded American man doesn't like to?
How strange to equate those two things. Like, if you're not gonna fuck that dead lady, you're not an American. Oh, Jesus Christ. That's a whole new that brings a new level to boomerish, really. But no, I joke about everything, much to many people's dismay. But as much as I joke, I can't imagine. Under the circumstances of somebody like dying in their sleep, not pissing and shitting themselves, and being still somewhat warm, like, I can't imagine finding a corpse, an actual corpse with things missing or in any state of sort of state of decay, and feeling or desiring or even engaging in any kind of sexual activity with that, and desiring to do so, like that.
Well, For the cold, there's always
fascinates me
curling
that
irons.
somebody. What?
For a cold, there's always curling irons.
Oh wow. Okay.
Just saying. And my goodness, when we have some more time, I should talk to you all about mung huffing. By the way, that's a good one too. Not necessarily directly. Oh goodness. So mung huffing really does require, preferably, an already embalmed corpse, preferably fresh. And what you'll do is you will go and place your mouth over, typically, because you'll typically be using a female corpse for this. Necrophilia, it should be noted, is exponentially more common among men. And I think part of that is because women are like, ew, I'm not admitting that. ... Also, because the pure dynamics of it are just easier for a man. Women, we've got to get into like popsicle sticks and duct tape shit. But nonetheless, so that aside, so mung huffing, you are going to go and you are going to wrap your mouth around the vaginal opening of the freshly embalmed corpse. And if you are flexible enough,
high off of the fumes.
Yep, mung huffing. And if it's not a freshly embalmed corpse, there might even be maggots, so that you can have some texture in your life.
That's really gross.
Think about that next time you drink some orange juice with pulp in it. You're welcome.
That's my favorite kind of orange juice. God,
really
why would you do this to me?
I was just going to say that. That's fascinating. That's a whole new way to get high. Who the fuck thought of that?
A necrophiliac, obviously.
What kind of high do you get?
I hope it was. I hope it was a necrophiliac, just because, like, if it wasn't, think about that. Like, it was like, okay, I'm going to try this.
Right? Well, I mean, more people do meth than do mung huffing, so what does that say about the state of affairs?
I mean, I'm glad.
I don't know. Would you want it reversed?
For some reason, I'm more comfortable with the way that is.
Of people fucking getting high from like breathing in embalming fluid fumes from dead corpse vaginas.
I mean, it's a little more classy, if you ask me.
All right, fair enough.
I just really made you really uncomfortable, didn't I?
Yeah.
You sound so uncomfortable, Auger.
Auger, Joel is calling you out in chat. Like, laughing at how Metalface actually managed to give you pause.
Well, yeah, because it's just not something I'd ever considered. Nothing about that sounds fun. Like, I used to love getting high, but I don't imagine anybody, hey, you want to try this? I can't imagine being so yeah, fuck yeah, I do. Like, no, I'm good, thanks. Like,
have you ever physically touched a human corpse, Auger?
Yes.
Have you ever touched one? Oh, this is. Have you ever been to? I was trying to think about how to word it. Have you ever been to the funeral for a loved one and maybe kissed their forehead or cheeks or their lips?
Did he cut out?
I'm telling you, this thing kicks me at the perfect times. So you were asking, have you ever what?
Have you ever been to the funeral for a loved one or a friend and leaned down and kissed their forehead or their cheek or their lips?
I've done that too.
How did that feel?
Clammy, cold.
Weird.
Why?
That was not the sensation that I got the first time that I kissed a corpse at all.
Yeah, there was something very
different.
Missing, yeah.
I would say different, but missing never crossed my mind, personally.
That perhaps it's just me, but definitely there was definitely a sensation, a feeling, really.
Me too.
From a tactile sense of there being something not right. Not in a bad sense, but like just off. Like this something's gone. Something's missing. So this isn't.
And I definitely looked at that very differently. One of my best friends in this world was killed in a car accident. And when I leaned down to give him a kiss, I found it rather pleasant, actually. Largely, I don't like how warm people are. And
you've mentioned that.
I found his skin to be so pleasant feeling.
That's interesting. So it's a texture, temperature thing?
Yeah, it's kind of a tactile thing, and I didn't mind at all, just the general texture and feel.
Yeah, that wasn't the experience I got. There was definitely I would say connected to it was the sense of mortality, which I think normally would put people off. That's
See,
not something.
And I genuinely, I don't know. My friend's name was James. And I've got to tell you that when I leaned down and kissed him that time, because I had kissed him, of course, when he was alive, and I got to tell you, I had never felt a kiss between us that felt more intimate and simple.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, I can definitely see how people can get there. If I had a dick, I'd probably stick in a corpse. I don't know.
I'm not saying that I wouldn't consider it, but I considering the.
Well, you would have trouble with your anal fixation, sir, because everybody goes in the ground with a butt plug in.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, also with their nipples pierced. Did you know that? Women always get their nipples pierced.
Why?
So they can run fishing wire so that the breasts sit as naturally as possible, because since it's fatty tissue, it breaks down first.
Oh, you mean for the viewing?
Mm-hmm.
What if there is no viewing? You don't have to do that then.
Well, then I guess you can go into the ground without your nipples pierced if you want to live a boring life and a boring death.
Now I'm just picturing like people with a viewing, but who also get cremated. Like I'm imagining an urn, and you shake the urn, and you get clinks from the nipple piercings.
Well, they don't put barbells in them, for fuck's sake.
I don't know what fucking piercings they're using.
If I am cremated, yeah, it's super likely there's going to be some clinking, because if they cremate me, which, by the way, I don't want, I'd rather be left in a ditch. Literally, I'd actually like to be buried, but if it came down to just chuck me somewhere to forget about me versus cremate me, chuck me somewhere. I would much prefer to actually be buried, but I really do not want to be cremated. Not even a little bit. It freaks me the fuck out. Don't like it. Mm-mm. Also, I've got it built into my will that somebody better make use of this lovely corpse before it gets disposed of. Otherwise, I'll be very offended.
You want somebody to fuck your corpse?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That's a perfect time to end and transition to the Q&A.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, we definitely have we like to end the show with a Q&A. And we've got about 20 minutes before we officially end, and after which time we try and do like a half an hour after show, which I don't know, Sativa, if you have the time to join us for that or not.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I got you.
But now we should, if anybody has questions, please feel free to write them into the chat. Or if you would like to ask them directly, you are more than welcome to let us know in chat that you would like to be unmuted, and we will happily do that. Adam, do we have any questions currently?
Yes, we do. I got a few.
Great.
So we're going to start out with the traditional ones. Oh, what'd you say?
Oh, I know. What's your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur is a Utah raptor.
What's the difference between a Utah raptor and just a regular raptor?
So there are many types of raptors. Now, the Jurassic Park franchise would have us believe that it was selling us velociraptors. It wasn't. Velociraptors were about the size of a chicken. the beautiful, beautiful critters that we fell in love with on screen, were actually modeled after Utah raptors, not velociraptors. But velociraptor looks better written all over a package. So I love the shit out of some Utah raptors. But yeah, the Jurassic Park thing kind of got that all fucked up. Fun shout out, the book Raptor Red by Robert T. Bakker. Everybody should check it out.
Okay. What's it called? Raptor Red?
Raptor Red by Robert T. Bakker. Oh, excuse me.
Okay.
Super good one.
I interrupted you. You had questions?
I did too.
No, you're good. So, the other traditional question at this point, can you say the South will rise again in your Southern accent?
Oh, God. I do such horrible, horrible accents. But we're gonna go ahead and give it a shot. The South will rise again. That was bad. That was like Southern Canada.
I'll give you another shot.
I'm so bad at accents. I don't even know what Southern accent sounds like. Shut up, Auger. I don't.
Where's you fucking? Oh my god! Oh my god! Do it again.
I don't know. The South will rise again. Was that better?
That's a little better. Right. That was a little better.
That had a little Dolly Parton to it.
Hey, whoever you've got to channel to get it right.
Yeah.
Right. What else we got? What else we got, Adam?
That was fantastic. Okay, so Allison asks, has your tongue rings ever got caught on a pierced dick ring?
No. However, one time, my husband got his septum ring hooked on one of my Australian piercings. Yeah. So,
wait.
No, I have not gotten any of my piercings stuck on a penis, but I have had my husband's face stuck to my genital region with a piercing very briefly. Yeah, very briefly, but it happened, and I could hear somebody coming down the hall, and it scared the bejesus out of me. But we got unhooked pretty easily, so that was nice.
Is there a taint piercing?
Yes, it is called a guiche piercing.
I've heard of that, but there's no rectal piercings, are there? Nobody's piercing around there.
Yes, it is super rare and it's super ill-advised, but it has happened. I have in fact done one, and that's a whole lot of Jesus. Bend over and pray for the best. It's obviously a bad idea because it's almost guaranteed to get infected. It's just I don't care how clean you are, your butthole's not clean.
Yeah, no, it's the opposite of that, really. All right, so other questions?
Yeah, sorry, before we move on, I love that euphemism, Australian piercings.
Yes, they're down under.
Because it's down under.
Yeah, that was actually my mother. I totally stole that from my mother because I had a client trying to talk to me in the middle of Walmart, and I was super embarrassed to whip out all of the anatomical terms in front of God and everybody and all these soccer moms. And my mom was like, honey, I think she's talking about Australian piercings. I was like, yes, exactly.
I heard something similar where it's can I give you an Australian kiss? It's like a French kiss, but down under.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, yeah.
But yeah, so Jack asks, Ultimate Bomber, Ted Kaczynski or Tim McVeigh?
Ooh. So, funny story. The two were briefly incarcerated together and became total BFFs. I think that's the cutest ever, by the way. I love bromances. I personally... if we're going body count, obviously McVeigh, but let us not forget that Terry Nichols was also involved. McVeigh was not working alone, whereas Kaczynski actually had a purpose and a goal that actually meant something and, makes sense and was working alone. I've got to go Kaczynski on that one. I have to vote home.
You know what? I think what impresses me the most about him. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say also, actually, Terry Nichols, who was the lesser known Oklahoma City bomber with Mr. Timothy McVeigh, is actually also still right down in Florence, Colorado, in the Supermax facility down there with Ted Kaczynski.
Wow.
Just saying. And he has very neat handwriting. Very neat handwriting.
Oh, you've written to him. You write to many of them, don't you?
I have not written to Terry Nichols, but I have had cause to have seen his handwriting. And yes, and it's quite neat and very legible, and he gets very possessive over his mops.
Over his what?
Mops. His cleaning tools, his mops. He gets very possessive over his mops and his rags.
That's interesting. I guess when you're incarcerated and you gotta get overly protective over something, that's as good a thing as any.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Adam, do you have other questions?
Yeah. So Chance asks, isn't there an STI that only necrophiliacs get? Do you know anything about that?
No, that is actually a huge urban legend. Huge. So the story started circulating that basically somebody was cheating on her boyfriend with these dead guys, and he found maggots in her vagina. And first of all, people should have known that was BS because she was a mortuary worker. They don't have maggots typically when they're being embalmed. Additionally, no. Here's the thing. They could not possibly, outside of, I guess, conceivably, you could be looking toward like bacterial infections, possibly, if you're looking at a very old corpse. But you've got to remember, they have no circulation. They cannot ejaculate. So where are you getting anything? There's no exchange of fluids per se. So I think that it's possible probably to come up with some sort of bacterial infection, but there's no actual like STI just for necrophiliacs because they can't really share anything except, embalming fluid if you're jumping on their stomach with your mouth around their vagina. Right. So that one I'm going to have to throw down as urban myth.
Dropping some knowledge. All right.
Yeah, bam.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
So a lot of the serial killer talk centers around like past 100 years. Do you have a favorite from like 19th century or before?
I do.
That's a good question, and it is. So I'm gonna level with you. I get asked that a lot, and I'm gonna have to throw out there were a set of brothers back in the day, the Harper brothers. I've actually recently started learning about them. Like in the last probably year, I've started learning a little bit about them. Super interesting, super fucked up guys. And I think that if I had to peg one, that would be it. Everybody goes on about Jack the Ripper. I'm not a Jack the Ripper gal because let's face it, it was 4 dead prostitutes, yada, yada, yada. We haven't solved it. It was practically the fucking Dark Ages. Of course, we haven't solved it. We have also not solved the Zodiac Killer, and that was a little more impressive in my opinion.
Yeah.
Zodiac Killer's so I'd have to go Harper Brothers.
Fancy puzzles and whatnot.
Yeah, I'd have to go Harper Brothers.
Where did the Harper Brothers take place? What time and where?
Oh, balls. Like late 1800s. And I'm trying to remember roughly whereabouts they were. Excuse me.
Stateside?
Balls. Yeah, it was stateside, absolutely. Harp Brothers, not Harper. Sorry, it's Harp Brothers. And it was actually late 18th century, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, and Mississippi.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I totally had to just cheat and look that up real quick. Sorry.
I would like to add. Can you ask your question one more time, Adam? I want to make sure that I'm giving an answer that's correct.
Basically, just favorite serial killer from like 19th century or before.
Okay, so then yes, my favorite sort of, I guess, serial killer, definitely serial killer, is Guy de Rais. And I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he was a French, I want to say nobleman, definitely a knight, who served at the side of Joan of Arc. In fact, I believe in every film, he's shown as a figure. He was a prominent figure. He was at her side throughout the entire time she was wreaking havoc and doing her thing, and was considered a hero. And then when that all was done and they killed Joan, he went back home and took over the castle, his family's castle, which he inherited, went to the top tower and made sort of a workroom where he like made sacrifices. He took kids from the local village and would torture and murder them. I mean, he went from being the hero that helped to save France to being one of the most dastardly, just horrific, inhuman, the things he did. Like, I mean, we're talking like ritualistic killings and like, you know, pentagrams on the fucking, drawn in blood on the goddamn floor. And I mean, this guy was just, and the contrast of that, just going from, he saved France in the name of the Lord to I'm going to kill, rape, and murder children, and then they even figured it out and couldn't do anything for a while because, of course, it was a feudal system back then. So you had the fact that he was noble or nobility, and people were like, we're pretty sure we know what's going on, but what can we do about it? And they finally, I guess, some of the other nobility found out and kind of put a stop to it. But that's my favorite of all of them. If you don't know, I think his name is Gillesdesarais. If you've never looked him up, fucking look him up. He is absolutely beautifully horrific. So anyway.
Nice.
Go ahead, Adam. Ask more questions.
All right. So, last one that I have logged. So, guys in the audience, give me more questions. Allison asks, "Who's your favorite cannibal?"
Ooh, favorite cannibal? I'd have to give to Fishy. I've got to give it to Albert Fish. On paper, here's the thing, and I've been struggling with this one a lot. On paper, Jeffrey Dahmer should be my shit. I love gay men. I fucking love necrophiliacs. I fucking love cannibals. So here stands this perfectly lovely cannibal, fucking necrophiliac, homosexual, and I'm like, he's all right. I don't know why I don't love Jeffrey Dahmer, but I don't. And he's also got that super cute little accent, and I don't give a fuck. I got to give it to Fishy. He was kind of crazy, but you know. And I'm actually, I'm so in the phone.
And I'm gay, and you're like, I don't give a fuck.
Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's a thing. But yeah, I've got to give it to Albert Fish for favorite cannibal.
I'm not familiar with Fish. I think you were talking about earlier,
God,
right?
look him up. So, a funny story. Fish is a man after my own heart. When they finally captured Albert Fish and they did an X-ray to figure out what was going on with his pelvic region, this was a true sadomasochist, this man, and those are rare to come by. Actually had literally a couple of dozens of like nails, needles, literally anything to find jammed into his pelvis. Some of them were actually jammed so far in there that you could see on the X-ray that they were actually bent because he kept driving the nail in after it hit his pelvic bone, and he kept driving it in. Albert fucking Fish, man, look him up. He's a psycho. He, in my opinion, was a made monster, by the way, not a born one, because the abuse that man suffered as a child was absolutely unspeakable. He was one of those, because every time I go to do some of my paintings, I like to research my gentleman a little bit, and Fish and Panzram were two of the hardest for me to paint because Albert Fish and Carl Panzram, man, those boys saw some shit growing up, and it broke my heart for them a little bit. It really did. It's hard stuff to read about, even considering what they did later. Just to imagine a child going through these things as you're reading about it, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely horrific. It is. But yeah, I mean, for creativity and grandpa pizzazz, I got to give it to Fish.
You know, did you ever hear about that family that lived in a cave in Scotland back in the 18th?
Yes.
19th century.
Yep.
There was like a whole family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Essentially, like the father, I guess they had like a house and everything, but somehow I don't know if they ever figured out why, but at some point they decided they were going to live down in a cave by the water, like the breakwater or something, and they just lived in there as a family. And he kept fucking the mom and then the daughters, and kept having kids, and so there was this incestuous aspect to it. And then they were like highwaymen. They would come out at night when it was all foggy in the highlands, and they'd fucking, come down on unsuspecting travelers in the night and just bop them over the head, and then drag them into the cave, and then chop them up and eat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've always found that fascinating. Like, to do that as a family.
It absolutely is. And cannibalism and necrophilia are really the last two great taboos that exist in the vast majority of societies these days. There's still a couple holdouts on the cannibal front, but those really are the two big ones. Like, worldwide, that people are like, ew, no, I'm good, thanks. Like, people don't want to be eaten or fucked after they die.
Well, right.
That's why zombies are such an efficient horror monster, even though they're slow and stupid. Is because for the bulk of us in modern society, we're like, ew, I don't want to be eaten, because it speaks to our intrinsic fear back, from back in the day when we were not the top of the fucking food chain. So yeah, that's a whole interesting like study in and of itself. I love it. And there are, like I said, there's a handful of very primitive societies out there that still practice cannibalism. But for the bulk of us, like sitting here in the United States, we're like, ew, don't eat me, gross. What the fuck?
Yeah,
but so I think that's why. Yeah, so I think that's why cannibals are so fascinating.
It's funny. I once did an experiment back in the BCLR, when there was a BCLR, before it was, when the BCL Confederation wasn't even around. And I started a post where I had asked people, why is necrophilia illegal? And
it's not in some states. There's actually states where it's not illegal. There are states right now in 2018 that have laws against having intercourse with a dead animal, but it does not say anything about people. In fact, in a lot of these states, the worst they can get you for is desecration of a corpse. There's actually no specific charge for fucking a corpse.
That's
not that you probably needed to know that, and not that I've researched it. That's crazy.
I would imagine it's kind of a non-issue for most of these people, but still.
Yeah, it's legal in Nebraska is all I'm saying. And Wisconsin.
But, I mean, the whole point the whole point to my asking the question or making that post was to try and drive home to people, like, what's the legality of it, really? And people were trying to come up with reasons why it was illegal, and it would always boil down to, eventually, because I would go, well, that just seems like the common thing was, well, consent. They're dead, so they can't consent. I said that's exactly why it should be legal. They're not living. You can only ask for consent, and there's precedents within the Supreme Court for that. And it would always boil down to, well, it's just gross and it's wrong. Okay, people, now why are you doing that? I was like, that's not a legal fucking standing. That's not a reason to make it illegal.
But that's the biggest reason that it is illegal. It's not about consent in the places that it is illegal. They'll say that, but it's because people are like, ew, what the fuck? Ew, no.
They'd be like, well, people are going to get mad if you're fucking their dead grandma. I said, well, what if grandma consented? What if there's written consent from grandma? Hey, when I die, this guy over here can fuck me. And people were like, no.
Yeah, no, I've checked into that. And in states where it is not outright illegal, which in most states it's not, in most states where it is not outright illegal, written consent prevents anyone from being brought up on charges for it.
Are you sure about that? That it's not outright illegal?
I'm not kidding.
Sounds like it's a federal
I'm not kidding. But here's the thing, though. It's not a federal thing. Desecration of a corpse is not a federal thing. Additionally...
That's state to state?
Yes, it is. Also, it gets rid of the consent issue. Yeah. Just saying.
States' rights sometimes fascinates me. Where like one state's like, yeah, you can't just go around fucking digging up corpses and fucking them. And
the government, no.
Is like, you can't over here.
We don't mind.
The government has had control over me my entire life. When I die, the government can suck a dick. because no, I'm going to have done with my body what I want done with my body. They've had control of me my whole life. When I die, fuck off, government. I'm not worth any money to you anymore. Leave me alone. Goodbye. Let me desecrate my corpse in the ways that I want to, goddammit.
That's right. That's fucking right.
Damn right.
So
right.
I believe Nicole
I think
had a question.
Okay, great.
So I'll let her unmute herself.
Yeah, hey. Well, let me get away from the echo. Okay, well, I have a question, but I also saw that he came from Zeta, had a question too, so I'll say his first.
Okay.
He wants to know, commies, physical removal, or nah?
I'm going to have to vote nah. Here's the reason. I think that in the grand scheme of all the shit show we've got going on right now, commies are not the worst thing out there right now. Also, I have a very good friend who
what the fuck's worse than a commie?
Lots of things are worse than commies. Lots of things. And here's the thing. I'd rather deal with a commie than a Nazi any day of the week. I'd rather deal with a commie than a person who is way dumber than they think they are, trying to tell me how to do my job. And the handful of people that I've personally interacted with who genuinely believe in communism have been super pleasant people in my life. Like one of my oldest friends is genuinely a communist, and I love this shit out of him. He is one of my favorite humans. No shit. So and possibly this is more emotionally than logically driven answer. I'm going to say I'm going to have to go ahead and say nah, because again, there are so many worse things out there, and I have personally never had a communist wrong me in any direct way. So, man, that kind of goes back to my super hippie live and let live thing. Like, until a communist bothers me with their communism, I don't really care. So, unpopular opinion, I'm going to go nah.
I think that's
all right,
fair.
Well, you're going to be kicked out of this group. I'm sorry. We have to let you go.
As soon as the show is over, you fucking go.
Pack up your things. Move out.
Oh.
Yes, this is an online group. I still said pack up your things. All right.
I'll pack my shit right now.
All right.
Get ready for the helicopter ride.
Nicole, what was? Oh yeah, like the fucking helicopters aren't already coming after the whole Kaczynski conversation. Nicole, what was your question?
Well, I do have a question, but I also know that we are at the time where we need to move into the after show, so I'd be happy to ask it in there as well.
Works for me.
You know what? We're already 3 minutes over. 2 more minutes isn't going to be a big deal.
Okay. If you're not comfortable with talking about this, just tell me and we'll move on.
Oh, I like this already.
I know you have mentioned before, you call your current husband number one, and
correct.
The idea of marriage contracts.
Yeah.
Oh shit, that's right.
That you practice that in your life, right?
Actually, I'm gonna hold off on this then. We've asked the question. For those who would like to hear the answer, join us on the after show. But we are definitely, because this is going to be...
that is so not a 2-minute question at all.
Figured.
I am about answering that, but that's not a 2-minute answer.
Okay.
Hello?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
everyone
Josh
just stopped talking.
Everybody just...
This is the awkward part where we have to wait for Auger to come back so then he could say goodbye to the main show, and I don't know.
Yeah, of course, it was horrible timing again.
Wonderful.
Like
wonderful
it
as
timing.
per usual.
Mm-hmm. Every time. But yeah, I've been wanting to ask you this question since I knew we were going to interview you because I find it so intriguing.
I had completely forgotten about it.
Yeah. Okay. So this thing fucking loves to kick me at the most inopportune moments. Yeah. All right. Like I said, we will answer that question in the after show. We have come to the end of the show for tonight. I want to thank you, Sativa, for joining us and being my guest tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, of course, to all of my co-hosts, Adam, Joel, Nicole, McIntyre. Thank you, guys. Wouldn't have a show without you. Okay, and then also I'd like to thank everybody. You gotta love the deer in headlights just blinking like, yeah, we know. Just a dead silence.
We're still here. I mean, what do you want us to say? Yeah, we know. We know you can't do it without us. So, you know.
I don't know.
Think about Adam.
Of course. Thanks for that. I don't know.
Oh my God, you're terrible at that. Please don't ever make that noise again, ever.
I wasn't trying. I wasn't like
clearly.
Whatever. Also, to the audience, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, you've been listening to the House of Auger show. I'm your host, JT Auger. Good evening and go home.